The world of 1180 is not a world of maps and borders, but a world of textures and whispers. Here, within the high, lime-washed walls of a private estate in Hangzhou, the air carries a weight that the modern soul has long forgotten. It is the weight of absolute, unhurried peace. Outside these walls, the Southern Song Dynasty is a whirlwind of silk commerce, philosophy, and the distant shadows of northern conflict. But inside, time has been commanded to stand still. You are standing in the cloud-resting courtyard, a place where the architecture is designed to catch the moon and hold the mist. The ground beneath your feet is a mosaic of river pebbles, cooled by the night and slick with a dew that tastes of the nearby West Lake. Close your eyes and breathe. The scent is the first thing that greets you, not as a sharp hit, but as a creeping ethereal presence. It is the jasmine. Thousands of tiny star-shaped white blossoms are beginning to stir as the very first suggestion of light brushes the horizon. This is the hour of the ghost light, when the world is rendered in shades of charcoal, indigo, and silver. There is a specific tension in the air, a biological clock ticking within the vines. The jasmine buds, tightly furled like the secrets of a scholar, are waiting for the exact moment of atmospheric shift to release their soul. To pick them too early is to lose their heart. To pick them too late is to lose their spirit. You hear it before you see it, the soft, rhythmic brush of fabric against stone. The gardener is approaching. He does not carry a lamp, for he knows the placement of every jagged rockery stone and every drooping willow branch by memory. His movement is a form of moving meditation, a slow-motion dance through the fog. In his hand he carries a basket of split bamboo, aged to a deep amber hue. It is empty now, but it carries the faint, lingering perfume of decades of previous harvests. This is not mere labor. In the Song Dynasty, the scent of jasmine is considered a bridge between the earthly and the divine. To harvest these flowers is to gather the breath of the mountain. A distant sound vibrates through the damp air, the low bronze hum of a temple bell from the hills of Solitary Mountain. It travels across the water of the West Lake, climbs over the tiled roofs, and settles into the courtyard like a physical touch. It marks the start of the ritual. As the bell's resonance fades, a large red koi breaks the surface of the black pond in the center of the garden. The splash is a liquid punctuation mark in the silence. The ripples expand, catching the silver light, hitting the limestone edges with a delicate lap-tap that signals the awakening of the water. The gardener stops. He bows slightly, not to a person, but to the space itself. He reaches out a hand, his fingers calloused but moving with the grace of a calligrapher's brush. He finds the first vine. The jasmine is wet, heavy with the night's tears. He does not pull, he coaxes. With a gentle twist of the wrist, the first blossom is freed. It falls into the basket with a sound so soft it is almost felt rather than heard. This is the beginning of the long, silent harvest. The mist begins to swirl, caught in a phantom breeze that smells of wet pine and ancient ink. You realize that you aren't just watching a task, you are witnessing a preservation of a moment that has repeated for centuries. Every movement is deliberate. Every breath is synchronized with the rustle of the leaves. The gardener moves deeper into the thicket of green, disappearing and reappearing through the shifting veils of fog. The basket begins to fill, a mound of white stars against the dark wood. This is the art of the song, finding the infinite within the infinitesimal. As the sky turns from indigo to a bruised pale violet, the real work begins. The garden is no longer a place, it is a living, breathing entity, and you are part of its exhale. The gardener's fingers move with a prehistoric precision, a rhythm dictated by the pulse of the earth itself rather than the ticking of a clock. Each jasmine bud is a miniature sculpture of ivory, cold to the touch and swollen with the essence of the night. He knows that the jasmine of Hangzhou is unlike any other. It is fed by the subterranean springs that seep through the limestone heart of the surrounding hills. As he reaches into the heart of a particularly dense vine, the leaves brush against his forearms, leaving trails of cold condensation that soak into his indigo-dyed sleeves. He does not flinch. To him the cold is merely a reminder of the mountain's vitality. He selects only those blossoms that are about to burst the dragon's teeth, as they are known in the poetic vernacular of the song courts. If the flower is already fully open, its soul has already begun to dissipate into the morning air. If it is too tight, it remains stubborn and bitter. The perfect bud is a promise, a coiled spring of fragrance waiting for the heat of the tea water to release its long-held narrative. As he moves, the geography of the garden reveals itself in the growing light. To his left, a towering rockery made of Taihu stone stands like a jagged, fossilized cloud. These stones, harvested from the bottom of Lake Tai, are prized for their shou, zhou, lu, and tu, their thinness, texture, holes, and openness. In the dim light, the holes in the rock catch the drifting mist, creating tiny, localized vortexes of fog that make the stone appear to be breathing. The gardener passes by this stone sentinel, his basket now a third full. The weight is negligible, yet the responsibility feels immense. These flowers are destined for the master of the house, a retired scholar who spent his youth in the imperial courts of Kaifeng before the Great Migration south. For the master, this jasmine tea is not a beverage, it is a memory of a lost northern home, scented with the resilience of the southern soil. The silence of the courtyard is layered. If you listen closely, you can hear the voice of the garden. There is the microscopic sound of the jasmine vines shifting as they are relieved of their white burdens. There is the distant rhythmic creak of a bamboo water pipe, a shishiodoshi, filling up and tipping over, striking a stone with a hollow clack that echoes against the high walls. This sound serves to startle the deer in the wild, but here it serves to ground the meditator, a reminder of the passage of time in a place that tries to deny it. The gardener's breath is a steady white plume in the air. He practices the art of quiet breathing, a technique learned from the monks at the Lingyan temple. It ensures that his own humours do not disturb the delicate aromatics of the flowers. To breathe too harshly upon the jasmine is to bruise the scent, to introduce the heat of the human body into the purity of the floral oil. He transitions now to the older vines, those that have climbed the wooden trellis for over 30 years. Their stems are thick and gnarled like the hands of an old man, but their offspring are the most fragrant of all. Here the jasmine grows alongside scholars' rocks and low-hanging plum trees that have already dropped their petals for the season. The ground is a tapestry of fallen plum blossoms and the emerging green of moss. The gardener moves with a light step, careful not to crush the velvet green carpet that blankets the base of the walls. This moss is a prized feature of the garden, cultivated with as much care as the flowers themselves. It represents the passage of eons, the slow green persistence of life on stone. The light is changing again. The bruised violet of the sky is being bled out by a pale, watery gold. This is the most dangerous time for the harvest. Once the sun's rays touch the petals directly, the essential oils will begin to retreat into the stem, and the harvest will be over. The gardener quickens his pace, his hands becoming a blur of practiced motion. Left, right, twist, drop. Left, right, twist, drop. The basket is becoming a white sea of stars. The scent is now overwhelming, a thick honeyed cloud that seems to vibrate in the nostrils. It is a scent that carries notes of green grass, wet earth, and a sweetness so deep it feels like a physical weight on the tongue. The koi in the pond are more active now. They sense the shift in the atmosphere. Their scales, a riot of gold, white, and ink black, shimmer just beneath the dark surface of the water like sunken treasure. One large fish, ancient and scarred, follows the gardener's shadow from within the pond, its wide eyes watching the man move along the perimeter. There is a silent communion between them, two inhabitants of a closed world, both bound by the walls and the water. The gardener reaches the end of the trellis and pauses. He looks up at the sky where the last stars are being extinguished by the encroaching day. He has only a few minutes left. He moves toward the final cluster of jasmine, located near the moon gate, a circular opening in the wall that frames the view of a distant mist-covered pagoda. This is the heart of the scent, the oldest section of the garden, where the air is so saturated with jasmine that it feels as though one is walking through a liquid. He prepares his heart for the final stretch of the ritual, knowing that each flower he picks is a fleeting moment of beauty captured before it can be lost to the sun. The gardener reaches the moon gate, that perfect limestone circle that symbolizes the fullness of the universe. Here, the jasmine grows in wilder, more exuberant clusters, cascading down the white stone like a frozen waterfall of green and ivory. The air here is trapped in a pocket of stillness, protected by the curve of the gate and the density of the surrounding bamboo grove. As he works, the gardener thinks of the tea master waiting in the inner chambers. The relationship between the picker and the brewer is one of silent trust. The master requires buds that have been handled only by the tips of the fingers, never the palms, to avoid the salt of sweat. Each flower in this basket is a testament to that discipline. The gardener's hands are cold, almost numb from the morning chill, yet they retain a tactile intelligence that allows him to distinguish between a bud that will bloom in an hour and one that will take two. This moment of deep immersion is rare in our modern lives. We are so often distracted by the noise of the future and the echoes of the past that we forget the profound power of the present. If you find yourself finding peace in this 12th century garden, if the sound of the temple bell and the scent of the jasmine are bringing a sense of calm to your day, please consider subscribing to our journey. By joining us, you help keep these stories of ancient tranquility alive, allowing us to continue exploring the quiet corners of history together. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a moment of these peaceful chronicles. Now, as the gardener moves closer to the bamboo, the soundscape changes. The bamboo leaves, long and elegant, rustle against one another with a sound like shifting silk. This is the voice of the wind, a sound that Song Dynasty poets spent lifetimes trying to capture in ink. The gardener listens. To him, the rustle indicates the strength of the rising morning breeze. If the wind grows too strong, it will carry the scent away, dispersing the concentrated essence he has worked so hard to gather. He bends low, his knees cracking slightly, a human sound in a botanical world, as he reaches for the blossoms hidden near the roots. These lower flowers are often the most potent as they are shielded from the wind and nourished by the richest mulch of the garden floor. He notices a small spider web stretched between two jasmine stems, beaded with dew like a necklace of liquid diamonds. He pauses, his hand hovering in the air. To destroy the web would be to disrupt the harmony of the heavenly well. He carefully reaches around it, his fingers dancing through the gaps in the silk. There is no room for clumsiness here. In this garden, every living thing has its station and its purpose. The spider, the koi, the jasmine, and the man are all threads in the same tapestry. The basket is nearly full now, a heavy, fragrant weight against his hip. The white blossoms glow with an inner light, appearing almost incandescent against the dark, wet wicker. The light has now transitioned from a watery gold to a crisp, clear yellow. The shadows of the pagoda visible through the moon gate begin to lengthen across the distant hills. The gardener knows his time is at an end. He takes a final look at the vines. There are still many buds left, but he will not take them. A harvest must never be greedy. One must leave enough for the bees that will soon arrive, and enough for the garden to maintain its own beauty. He stands tall, stretching his back, and looks toward the main house. A faint plume of smoke is rising from the kitchen chimney. The charcoal fires are being lit, the water from the tiger spring is being heated. The transition from the garden to the cup is about to begin. He turns away from the moon gate, his task complete, carrying the captured soul of the morning back toward the world of men. The gardener begins his walk back toward the inner sanctum of the estate, his pace even more measured than before. A full basket of jasmine is a volatile treasure. The blossoms are delicate, and the slightest jostle could bruise the petals, causing the precious oils to oxidize and turn bitter. He walks with a slight flex in his knees, absorbing the unevenness of the pebble path, acting as a human shock absorber for the floral cargo. The light is now strong enough to illuminate the intricate carvings on the wooden eaves of the main pavilion. Dragons and phoenixes, frozen in mid-flight, seem to watch his progress from above. These carvings are blackened by time and the humid Hangzhou air, but they lend a sense of ancestral gravity to the morning. As he nears the veranda, the transition from the wilder, natural sections of the garden to the more structured living quarters becomes apparent. The moss gives way to polished flagstones, and the chaotic beauty of the jasmine vines is replaced by potted penjing miniature trees that have been trained over decades to resemble ancient pines clinging to mountain cliffs. The gardener stops briefly at a stone basin, where a small bamboo spout trickles water with a rhythmic hypnotic pulse. He dips his free hand into the water, cooling his skin before entering the house. The temperature of the human body is a threat to the jasmine. He must remain as cool as the mist he emerged from. Inside the threshold, the atmosphere changes instantly. The air is cooler here, smelling of old paper, sandalwood, and the faint, sharp tang of charcoal smoke. This is the realm of the scholar. The floors are covered in fine straw mats that yield silently under the gardener's weight. He moves toward the preparation room, a small, austere space where the air is kept perfectly still. In the center of the room sits a low table made of dark pear wood, and upon it rests a series of ceramic jars and a large flat bamboo tray. The gardener carefully lowers the basket. As the movement stops, the scent of the jasmine, previously contained by the cool morning air, suddenly expands, filling the small room with an intoxicating floral density that feels almost tactile. He begins the process of spreading. With a light, sweeping motion, he transfers the buds from the basket onto the bamboo tray. They must not be piled high. They need space to breathe, to settle after the trauma of being plucked. He spreads them out in a single, even layer. In the soft, diffused light coming through the paper screens, the white blossoms look like a fallen galaxy. He looks for any stray leaves or stems that might have hitched a ride in his basket. To leave a single leaf among the flowers would be a failure of craft, as the green tannins of the leaf would clash with the ethereal sweetness of the blossom. His eyes, though tired from the pre-dawn wakefulness, are sharp, scanning the white field for any imperfection. From the adjacent room, the sound of a metal whisk hitting a ceramic bowl signals that the master is awake. The tea master is a man of few words, a philosopher who believes that the truth can be found in the steam rising from a cup. The gardener waits. There is a hierarchy to this silence. The flowers must rest and the man must wait. The sun is now high enough that a single beam of light pierces through a gap in the shutters, striking the bamboo tray. The gardener quickly moves to close the gap. Sunlight is the enemy of the harvest now. It would cause the buds to open prematurely, releasing their fragrance into the room instead of into the tea leaves. He stands in the shadows, a silent guardian of a fleeting essence, waiting for the moment when the jasmine and the tea will finally meet in their aromatic marriage. The stillness of the preparation room is absolute, a quiet so thick it feels as though the walls themselves are listening to the jasmine. The gardener stands motionless, his shadow stretching long and thin across the straw mats. This period of waiting is known as the settling of the breath. In the philosophy of the song, nothing of quality can be rushed. The flowers have been uprooted from their life on the vine and must be allowed to reconcile with their new state before they are joined with the tea. On a secondary table, the gardener eyes the primary companion for these blossoms, a heap of high-quality green tea leaves, harvested weeks earlier during the Qingming festival. These leaves have been dried and stored in airtight porcelain jars, waiting for this specific midsummer morning when the jasmine is at its most potent. The scent in the room is evolving. As the buds sit on the bamboo tray, the residual heat of the room, minimal as it is, begins to coax a deeper, creamier note from the ivory petals. It is no longer just the fresh, green scent of the garden. It is becoming something more sophisticated, a fragrance that suggests honey, apricot, and a hint of musk. The gardener knows this scent well. It is the scent of transition. He picks up a small wooden spatula, carved from the wood of an old plum tree, and gently turns the flowers. He does this not to mix them, but to ensure that no moisture is trapped beneath them. Any dampness would lead to rot, and in the world of high-grade jasmine tea, rot is the ultimate sin. Outside the paper screens, the garden is fully awake now. The distant chime of the temple bell has long since faded, replaced by the morning chorus of cicadas. Their rhythmic buzzing rises and falls like the tide, a wall of sound that somehow emphasizes the silence within the scholar's house. A servant passes by the exterior corridor, the sound of wooden sandals clacking rhythmically against the floorboards. The gardener does not look up. His focus is entirely on the white stars before him. He is looking for the opening. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the tips of the tightly furled buds are beginning to swell. They are preparing to bloom. This is the critical window. If the tea leaves are introduced too early, they will not absorb the scent. If they are introduced too late, the flowers will have spent their energy. He begins the layering process. He takes a large glazed ceramic vat, its interior smooth and cool. He places a layer of the green tea at the bottom, a dark emerald foundation. Then, using his hands with the lightness of a butterfly, he sprinkles a layer of the jasmine buds over the tea. He repeats this. Tea, then flowers, tea, then flowers. It is a masonry of aroma. The tea leaves are hygroscopic. They are thirsty for the moisture and the volatile oils of the jasmine. As they sit in the dark vat, the tea will literally inhale the soul of the flower. This is a slow theft, a gentle persuasion where the mountain leaf takes on the identity of the garden blossom. As he reaches the final layer, the gardener feels a sense of profound completion. The basket is empty, the tray is clear, and the vat is full. He places a heavy wooden lid over the vat and seals the edges with a clean linen cloth. For the next several hours, in the darkness of the sealed vessel, a transformation will occur that no human eye can see. The heat generated by the natural respiration of the flowers will warm the tea leaves, opening their pores and allowing the jasmine fragrance to settle deep into their veins. It is a marriage of opposites. The bitter, grounded strength of the tea and the fleeting celestial sweetness of the flower. The gardener wipes his hands on his apron, his task finally shifting from the physical to the temporal. He must now wait for the sun to reach its zenith before the first scenting is complete. The sun climbs higher, casting the shadow of the garden walls across the polished floor of the veranda inside the sealed vat. The alchemy continues in total darkness. The gardener moves to the corner of the room and sits upon a simple wooden stool. His work is now a matter of vigilance. He must monitor the temperature of the room, ensuring that no sudden draft or spike in heat disturbs the delicate respiration of the flowers. This is the stage of the great stillness. In the Song Dynasty, the production of scented tea was considered one of the 4 arts of the scholar, alongside incense, calligraphy, and flower arrangement. It is a pursuit that demands the removal of the self. As the gardener sits, he lets his own thoughts drift away, mirroring the quietude of the garden he just left. He thinks of the water, the third pillar of this ritual. For the tea to be perfect, the water must be as pure as the scent. Later this morning, a servant will bring fresh water from the tiger spring, known for its sweetness and weight. In Hangzhou, it is said that only tiger spring water is heavy enough to hold the lightness of the jasmine. The master will heat the water over a fire of olive pits which burns clean and scentless. Every element is aligned: the earth of the tea, the air of the flower, the fire of the olive pit, and the water of the spring. The gardener closes his eyes, and in his mind's eye he can still see the garden. He sees the koi circling in the dark pond and the mist clinging to the jagged rocks. He realizes that the garden is not just a place, but a state of mind, one that requires walls to protect it from the noise of ambition. This journey into the heart of the 12th century is a reminder that beauty often requires the most invisible of efforts. If you have found yourself drifting into the calm of this ancient courtyard, we invite you to support our efforts to preserve these moments of historical peace. Please like this video and share it with someone who needs a moment of respite from the modern world. Your engagement allows us to continue our deep dives into the sensory details of the past. Together we can ensure that the stories of the quiet and the patient are never forgotten. The gardener hears a soft bird call from the plum tree outside. It is a signal that the morning is maturing. Soon he will have to open the vat, sift out the spent blossoms, and replace them with a fresh batch of flowers to deepen the scent, a process that may be repeated up to 7 times for the highest grade of tea. Each time the tea becomes more deeply infused, until the leaves themselves seem to turn white with the memory of the jasmine. He stands up, his joints no longer stiff, but fluid and ready. He approaches the vat, placing a hand on the cool ceramic. He can almost feel the vibration of the scent inside. The ritual of the Song Dynasty is a cycle of renewal, a testament to the idea that nothing truly beautiful is ever made in a hurry. Sleepy History with Wesley is a sleep history storytelling platform created for entertainment, inspiration, education, and the promotion of positive emotional values. The gardener stands before the sealed ceramic vat, his hand resting lightly on the lid. The midday heat has begun to settle over the Song Dynasty estate, but within these thick stone walls and shaded corridors, the air remains remarkably temperate. This is the moment of the first opening. He unties the linen cloth with a slow, deliberate motion, careful not to stir any dust that might be lingering in the air. As the lid is lifted, a concentrated wave of fragrance rolls out, so dense it feels as though the room has suddenly been submerged in a floral ocean. The scent has changed again. It is no longer the fleeting, airy perfume of the garden. In the darkness of the vat, the tea leaves have begun to strip the jasmine of its moisture, and the resulting aroma is earthy, warm, and profoundly sweet. He begins the labor-intensive process of separating the soul from the body. Using a large circular sieve made of fine bamboo mesh, he pours the mixture of tea and flowers through. The spent jasmine buds, now wilted and yellowish, having given up their life essence to the emerald leaves, are caught in the mesh. The tea leaves fall through to the tray below. To an untrained eye, these discarded blossoms might seem like waste, but the gardener treats them with respect. They have fulfilled their purpose. He sets the exhausted flowers aside in a separate basket. They will later be composted back into the garden soil, completing the circle of life that began at the moon gate. The green tea leaves now look different. They are slightly plumped, having absorbed the humidity of the flowers, and they glisten with a faint, oily sheen. The gardener runs his fingers through the pile. They are warm to the touch, a result of the natural metabolic heat generated by the blossoms during the scenting process. This heat must be dissipated quickly. He uses a flat bamboo fan to gently move the air over the tea, a process called cooling the heart. If the leaves remain warm for too long, they will begin to ferment, ruining the crisp, brisk character of the green tea that the scholar prizes so highly. As he fans the leaves, the gardener watches the light move across the floor. The shadows of the bamboo grove outside are dancing against the paper screens, creating a shifting play of inkwash patterns that look like a living scroll painting. In this moment, the connection between the garden and the craft is undeniable. The garden provides the raw poetry, but it is the gardener's discipline that turns that poetry into a tangible reality. He thinks of the master, who is likely in his library now, perhaps composing a poem about the very fragrance that currently fills this room. In the Song Dynasty, the appreciation of tea was inseparable from the appreciation of literature and nature. To drink this tea is to consume the garden, the weather, and the very silence of the morning. He prepares for the second scenting. This is the hidden truth of high-grade jasmine tea. One harvest is never enough. The tea leaves are now primed, their pores open and hungry. He will wait for the evening cool to return, and then he will repeat the entire process with a fresh batch of buds. Some batches will require 5, 6, or even 7 such cycles each time. The tea becomes a more perfect vessel for the jasmine's ghost. The gardener looks at his hands, which are now permanently scented with the blossom. He is a part of the tea now, just as the tea is a part of the garden. He gathers the cooled leaves and places them back into the storage jars, sealing them tightly to lock in the progress made so far. The long afternoon stretch of waiting begins again, a testament to the fact that in the year 1180, patience is not just a virtue, it is the very fabric of existence. The afternoon sun reaches its zenith, casting a brilliant hot light upon the exterior of the walled garden, yet inside the preparation room, the shadows remain long and cool. The gardener takes this time to rest, sitting in a corner where the floorboards are cold against his skin. He watches the dust motes dancing in a single shaft of light that has found its way through a knot in the wooden siding. These tiny specks move with a chaotic grace, much like the thoughts of a man before they are stilled by the ritual of tea. The estate is quiet. Even the servants in the distant kitchens have succumbed to the heavy, humid lull of the Hangzhou afternoon. This is the breath of the cicada hour, where the only thing moving is the sound of the heat itself. The gardener's mind wanders back to the flowers. He knows that by now, the jasmine bushes in the courtyard are bracing themselves against the sun, their petals tightly closed to preserve their moisture. They are resting, just as he is, gathering their strength for the next nocturnal release. In the Song Dynasty, the relationship between man and nature is one of mutual respect and synchronization. He does not force the flowers to yield, he follows their lead. This patience is what separates the artisan from the laborer. A laborer sees only the end product, a basket of flowers, a jar of tea. The artisan sees the invisible thread that connects the mountain spring to the scholar's cup. He stands and walks to the window, sliding the screen back just an inch. The garden is a sea of deep emerald and charcoal grey. The koi are hiding beneath the broad leaves of the water lilies, seeking refuge from the glare. The taihu stones look different in the harsh light of midday. Their holes and crevices are sharp and defined, losing the ghostly mystery they possessed at dawn. The gardener realizes that beauty is a shifting thing, dependent entirely on the light and the spirit of the observer. This tea he is making is a way to capture the dawn light and bottle it, so that the master may taste the cool mist of the morning even in the heat of the day. As the sun begins its slow descent toward the western hills, the gardener begins his preparations for the second scenting. He cleans the bamboo trays once more, ensuring no residue remains from the previous cycle. Each scenting must be a clean slate. He checks the jars of green tea. They are cool now, the leaves settled and ready for another infusion of fragrance. He knows that tonight's harvest will be different. The flowers picked in the evening have a slightly different character than those picked at dawn. They are bolder, having baked in the sun all day, carrying a hint of the earth's warmth. By blending the dawn harvest with the evening scenting, he creates a tea of incredible complexity, a full narrative of the garden's day. He picks up his wicker basket. It feels lighter than it did this morning, or perhaps he is simply more attuned to its weight. He prepares his heart for the return to the courtyard. The cycle will begin again, the walking, the waiting, the picking, and the layering. To some, this might seem like a tedious repetition, but to the gardener, it is the heartbeat of his existence. Each repetition brings him closer to perfection. Each flower is a lesson in focus. As he steps back out onto the stone path, the air is just beginning to lose its sharp edge of heat. The first hint of evening purple is creeping into the sky over Hangzhou. The garden is waiting for him, and he is ready to answer its call. Sleepy History with Wesley combines the power of AI to reimagine fictional historical tales, bringing peace, relaxation, and positive emotional values to our listeners. The transition from afternoon to evening in the year 1180 is a slow bleed of color. The sky above Hangzhou, once a brilliant and unforgiving turquoise, begins to soften into the shade of a bruised plum. As the gardener steps back into the courtyard, he feels the sudden drop in temperature. The garden is exhaling the heat of the day. The stone path, which had been warm to the touch an hour ago, is now rapidly cooling, drawing the warmth from the soles of his feet. This is the time of the long shadows, when the jagged taihu stones cast silhouettes that look like ancient scholars leaning over the pond. The gardener moves toward the jasmine vines once more, his basket swinging gently at his side. The air is still, but it carries a different charge than the morning. It is expectant, heavy with the anticipation of the night. He notices that the jasmine buds have changed. Under the pressure of the midday sun, they have become even more swollen, their white skins stretched thin over the aromatic treasures inside. These evening blossoms are the heirs of the sun. They have synthesized the light of the day into a concentrated nectar. The gardener reaches out and touches a leaf. It is dry and slightly dusty. He takes a moment to use a soft brush to clear the dust from the clusters he intends to pick. In the Song Dynasty, cleanliness is not just about hygiene, it is a spiritual requirement. To scent tea with dusty flowers would be to cloud the master's mind. He works with a renewed sense of purpose, his movements faster now, as the window of evening light is much shorter than the dawn. As he picks, the distant sounds of the city of Linan begin to drift over the walls. He hears the faint rhythmic drumming from the drum tower, marking the closing of the city gates. He hears the cries of the late-night vendors selling lotus seeds and steamed buns near the West Lake. These sounds feel like they belong to another universe. Inside this walled estate, the only reality is the friction of the stem snapping and the soft thud of the flower hitting the bottom of the basket. The gardener feels a sense of profound isolation, but it is not a lonely feeling. It is the isolation of a monk in a mountain cave, a necessary distance that allows one to see the world more clearly. The pond is now a dark mirror, reflecting the first few stars that have dared to appear. The koi are silent now, moving like ghosts in the depths. The gardener pauses by the water's edge to watch a single firefly blink into existence near the reeds. It is a tiny flickering lantern, a reminder that even in the deepest darkness there is a spark of life. He thinks of the tea leaves resting in the jars back in the house. They are like those koi, waiting in the dark to be transformed. The second scenting is often the most difficult, as the gardener is tired and the light is deceptive. He must rely more on his sense of touch and smell than his eyes. He navigates the trellis by the scent alone, moving toward the areas where the perfume is thickest. By the time the moon begins to rise, a pale ivory crescent hanging over the pagoda, the basket is full once again. The scent of the evening harvest is more muscular than the morning's. It has a hint of wood smoke and sun-baked earth. The gardener turns back toward the house, his silhouette lost against the dark green of the bamboo. He knows that tonight will be a long night. He will spend the hours of darkness layering these new flowers with the tea, ensuring that the marriage of leaf and blossom is deepened. As he crosses the threshold back into the preparation room, he leaves the world of the garden behind once more, carrying the captured essence of the evening into the silent, waiting dark. The transition into the night hours brings a different kind of intensity to the preparation room. The gardener sets the basket down, and for a moment he simply stands in the darkness, allowing his eyes to adjust. He does not light a candle immediately. He prefers to feel the presence of the tea and the flowers in the gloom. The air is thick, almost syrupy, with the combined scents of the morning's work and the new, vibrant harvest. When he finally strikes a small flint to light a single oil lamp, the flame flickers, casting dancing shadows of the ceramic vats against the walls. The orange glow reveals the tea leaves from the first scenting, which have now rested and are ready to be awakened once more. He begins the second layering. This is a delicate operation as the tea leaves are already partially saturated with fragrance. He must be careful not to overwhelm them. He uses a smaller ratio of flowers to tea this time, a technique known as the whispering infusion. He builds the layers slowly, his hands moving with a rhythmic grace that has become second nature. Each layer of green tea is like a bed of moss, and each layer of jasmine is like a dusting of fresh snow. As he works, he thinks of the southern song poets who spoke of drinking the moonlight. To them, jasmine tea was a way to capture the celestial energy of the night and hold it within a ceramic bowl. The silence of the house is now profound. The master has retired to his private quarters and the servants are asleep. The only sound is the occasional pop of the oil lamp and the dry, paper-like rustle of the tea leaves. The gardener feels a deep sense of connection to the generations of artisans who came before him. For centuries, men have sat in rooms like this, performing these same movements, driven by the same pursuit of an invisible perfection. In the year 1180, this work is not just a job, it is a contribution to the cultural elegance of an empire. Every jar of tea that leaves this estate carries with it the reputation of the garden and the skill of the gardener. As he finishes the final layer and seals the vat for the second time, a wave of exhaustion finally washes over him. He moves to his straw mat in the corner of the room, but his mind remains active. He listens to the house breathe. He hears the creak of the timber as it cools and the distant, muffled sound of a night heron calling from the west lake. These sounds are the background music to his life, a symphony of the mundane and the magnificent. He knows that in a few hours, before the sun even thinks of rising, he will have to wake and begin the sifting process once again. The cycle is relentless, but it is also deeply comforting. It provides a structure to his world, a purpose that is tied to the seasons and the soil. He closes his eyes, drifting into a light sleep. In his dreams he is back in the garden, but the garden has expanded to fill the entire world. The jasmine vines are as tall as mountains, and the koi are as large as dragons, swimming through a sea of liquid tea. He sees the master drinking from a cup that holds the entire sky. It is a dream of harmony, where the boundaries between the man, the flower, and the tea have completely dissolved. Even in sleep, his hands twitch slightly, as if he is still plucking stars from the dark green bushes of the Song Dynasty. The gardener wakes before the lamp has even flickered out. The air in the room is now so heavily perfumed that it feels as though he is breathing in liquid silk. It is the middle of the night, that deep velvet void where the line between reality and the spirit world is said to be thinnest in the Southern Song philosophy. He approaches the vat and places his palm against the ceramic. It is warm, the tea and the flowers are in the heat of their union. He knows that if he leaves them together too long, the heat will suffocate the tea's natural brightness. He must act now in the heart of the night to separate the spent blossoms from the scented leaves. As he begins to sift, his movements are slow and deliberate. Each motion is an act of preservation. If you find yourself soothed by the rhythmic nature of this ancient craft, we invite you to become a part of our community. Please consider subscribing and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Your support allows us to continue weaving these historical tapestries, bringing the forgotten stillness of the past into the busy modern world. Let us know which era of history brings you the most peace. The sifting is harder in the dim light of the single oil lamp. The gardener must rely on the texture of the leaves beneath his fingers. The jasmine buds are now soft and limp, their ivory color turned to a dull bruised cream. They have given everything. As he discards them, he feels a pang of gratitude. These flowers, which only 24 hours ago were reaching for the sun in the courtyard, have now become a permanent part of the tea's soul. The green tea leaves themselves have darkened slightly, appearing richer and more substantial. They carry the weight of the fragrance now, a heavy floral gravity that will linger in the cup for years if stored correctly. He spreads the tea out on the bamboo trays once more to cool. This is the third time the leaves have been handled, and they are becoming increasingly delicate. He uses a fan made of sandalwood, which adds a microscopic layer of woody depth to the air. The gardener looks toward the window. The moon has shifted across the sky, its light now reflecting off the whitewashed walls of the inner courtyard. The garden outside is a silver and black landscape, silent and expectant. He knows that in just a few hours, the first jasmine buds of the new day will begin to stir, and the entire cycle will begin again. He takes a small pinch of the tea leaves and holds them close to his nose. The scent is no longer a separate thing. The tea and the jasmine have become one. It is a fragrance that tells the story of the walls, the mist, the koi pond, and the patient hands that gathered the harvest. This is the middle way of the tea maker, finding the perfect balance where neither the leaf nor the flower dominates the other. He seals the tea back into the jars, feeling a sense of quiet triumph. The second scenting is complete. He will now rest for a final hour before the dawn calls him back to the moon gate for the third and final harvest of the ritual. The final hour of darkness is the deepest, a time when the world seems to hold its breath in anticipation of the sun's return. The gardener sits in the shadows of the preparation room, his back against the cool plaster wall. He does not sleep, for his body has entered a state of heightened awareness, a state the scholars call sitting in forgetfulness. In this state, the fatigue of the long day and the wakeful night falls away, replaced by a clarity that only comes with repetitive, meaningful labor. He listens to the silence of the Song Dynasty estate, a silence that is layered with the soft rustle of the bamboo outside and the occasional settling of the wooden beams overhead. This is the quietude that the poets of Linan crave, yet only few truly experience. As the first hint of grey begins to dissolve the ink-black sky, the gardener rises, his movements are fluid, his joints moving without a sound. He picks up his wicker basket, which has been cleaned and dried, ready for the final, most prestigious harvest, the triple-scenting buds. These are the flowers that will provide the final high-note polish to the tea, the aromatic peak that will define this batch as a masterpiece. He steps out onto the veranda, and the transition is immediate. The air is sharper now, colder than it was at yesterday's dawn. The dew is heavier, clinging to the moss and the stone lanterns like a layer of liquid silver. He walks toward the jasmine vines, and even before he reaches them, he can smell their readiness. The jasmine bushes are glowing in the pre-dawn light, their buds swollen and white, like thousands of tiny pearls scattered across a sea of emerald green. This is the moment of peak vitality. The plants have had the entire night to recover, and they are bursting with the energy of the coming day. The gardener begins to pick, his hands moving with an almost frantic grace. He knows that the first rays of the sun will be here soon, and with them, the delicate window of this third harvest will close forever. He focuses on the clusters near the northern wall, where the shade lingers the longest. These buds are larger, more robust, and carry a scent that is slightly more citrusy than the others. As he plucks them, he feels the cold dew soaking into his fingertips, numbing them slightly. This cold is essential. It keeps the blossoms from opening in his hands. He works with a singular focus, his mind a blank slate, recording nothing but the sensation of the stem, the weight of the flower, and the rhythm of his own breath. In this garden, in the year 1180, he is the bridge between the natural world and the refined world of the scholar's table. The pond is a pale, ghostly grey. The koi are motionless, huddled together in the deepest part of the water, their shapes barely visible beneath the mist. The temple bell from the distant hills begins its morning sequence, a series of low, resonant strikes that vibrate through the earth. Each strike seems to push the mist further back, revealing more of the garden's intricate geography. The gardener reaches the end of the trellis just as the sky turns a pale, bruised lavender. His basket is half full, but it is enough. Quality, not quantity, is the rule of the third scenting. He pauses to look back at the moon gate, now framed by the soft light of the emerging day. The garden has given its best, and he has been there to receive it. He turns back toward the house, his task in the courtyard finally complete, carrying the last of the jasmine stars into the waiting silence of the inner rooms. The gardener returns to the preparation room for the final time, the basket of triple scenting buds resting against his side like a heavy, fragrant cloud. The light filtering through the paper screens has shifted from a ghostly grey to a pale, translucent lemon. This is the final act of the ritual. The tea leaves, which have already undergone 2 scenting cycles, are now deeply complex, but they lack that final effervescent top note that distinguishes ordinary tea from the nectar of the immortals. He spreads the final harvest onto the trays, and the room is immediately overwhelmed by a scent so fresh it feels like a physical shock to the senses. It is the smell of the morning itself, concentrated and pure. He begins the final layering process with a level of care that borders on the religious. Every tea leaf is a vessel, and every flower is a drop of essence. He builds the layers thinner this time, ensuring that the fresh buds are in maximum contact with the double-scented tea. As he works, his mind drifts to the master's tea room, where the final tasting will take place. He imagines the master's hand, thin, aged and steady, lifting the porcelain lid of the gaiwan. He imagines the steam rising, carrying the story of this walled garden and the 2 nights of labor he has poured into it. In the Song Dynasty, to create something this perfect is a way of achieving immortality. Long after the gardener is gone, the memory of this specific fragrance will linger in the master's journals and poems. The heat within the final vat builds slowly. The gardener monitors it by placing his ear against the side of the ceramic, listening for the microscopic expansion of the leaves. There is a specific hum to a successful scenting, a vibrational quality that only a lifetime of experience can detect. When the heat reaches the temperature of a warm heart, he knows the infusion is at its peak. He sits on his stool, the oil lamp now extinguished, and lets the daylight take over the room. The transition is complete. Outside, the gardener can hear the distant sound of the city waking up, the rumble of carts, the calling of birds, and the bustle of life. But here, within the walls, the stillness remains. The jasmine has been captured, the tea has been transformed, and the ritual of 1180 has found its conclusion in the quiet, fragrant dark of the sealed jar. The final scenting has reached its peak. The gardener stands before the heavy ceramic vat, his hands resting on the lid as if he can feel the invisible exchange of energy occurring within. The sun is now fully above the horizon, and the estate is beginning to pulse with the quiet activity of a new day. A servant arrives at the door of the preparation room, carrying a wooden bucket of water. This is the tiger spring water, drawn at the first light when the minerals are said to be most balanced. The gardener nods silently, acknowledging the arrival of He prepares to open the vat for the final separation. This is a moment of both triumph and melancholy. He unties the linen seal for the last time, and the fragrance that emerges is no longer just jasmine. It is a profound atmospheric scent that captures the very soul of the southern song summer. It is the smell of the morning mist, the cool stones of the pond, the dark earth beneath the vines, and the patient hours of the night. He begins to sift with a lightness in his step, despite the exhaustion that pulls at his muscles. The spent blossoms are now entirely translucent, having surrendered every molecule of their fragrance to the green tea leaves. They are like small white ghosts discarded on the bamboo tray as the emerald tea remains, transformed and revitalized. As he finishes the sifting, the gardener spreads the tea out for the final drying. This stage is crucial. The leaves must be dried enough to prevent any future spoilage, yet not so much that the volatile jasmine oils are scorched away. He uses a specialized charcoal brazier, the heat kept at a low, steady glow that mimics the warmth of a summer afternoon. He moves the tea with a wooden rake, the sound of the dry leaves clicking against the bamboo tray like the sound of distant rain. The master will soon call for his morning service, and the gardener knows that this batch will be ready. He takes a moment to look out through the open window one last time. The garden is bright and clear now, the mist entirely gone. The jasmine vines look different today, thinner perhaps, but relieved of their heavy white burden. They have fulfilled their purpose for this cycle, and now they will rest and grow until the next moon calls for another harvest. The gardener feels a deep sense of peace in the year 1180. In a world that can be harsh and unpredictable, he has created a sanctuary of scent and flavor. He pours a small sample of the dry leaves into a silk pouch, sealing it with a gold thread. This is for the master. He carries it toward the inner chambers, his footsteps soft on the straw mats, leaving the preparation room behind as a silent witness to the long, fragrant labor of the night. The journey from the preparation room to the scholar's inner sanctum is a transition through layers of increasing refinement. The gardener walks along the covered veranda, the red lacquer pillars glowing in the morning sun. To his left, the garden remains a masterpiece of organized chaos, but to his right, the interior of the house represents the height of Song Dynasty aesthetic discipline. Every sliding door is a frame, every courtyard view is a living ink-wash painting. He carries the silk pouch of jasmine-infused tea as if it were a sacred relic. His hands, though rough from years of tending the earth and the vines, move with a startling delicacy. He knows that within this pouch is the culmination of 3 harvests, 2 nights of sleeplessness, and the silent cooperation of the weather itself. He stops at the entrance to the studio of tranquil contemplation. Here the scent of the house changes. The floral density of the preparation room is replaced by the dry, intellectual aroma of old parchment, ground ink, and the sharp, medicinal tang of pine resin incense. The scholar master is seated on a low platform, a brush in his hand hovering over a sheet of Schwen paper. He does not look up as the gardener approaches. In this space, silence is not an absence of sound but a presence of respect. The gardener kneels at the edge of the mat and places the silk pouch on a small lacquer tray. He then retreats several paces, waiting with his head bowed. This is the bridge of the ritual, the moment where the laborer hands the fruit of his patience to the philosopher. The master eventually sets his brush aside and reaches for the pouch. The sound of the silk rubbing against the lacquer is the only noise in the room. He opens the drawstring and inhales. For a long moment he says nothing. His eyes close, and for that brief window of time he is no longer an official of the imperial court or a man of letters. He is a traveller in the garden the gardener has built for him. He can smell the dawn of 1180, the cold pebbles of the Hangzhou pond, and the specific sweetness of the jasmine that grew near the moon gate. A slight nod of the master's head is the only praise the gardener needs. It is an acknowledgement that the soul of the garden has been successfully translated into the language of the leaf. Preparation for the first tasting begins immediately. The servant who brought the tiger spring water now steps forward, tending to a small, elegant charcoal stove. The water must not boil too fiercely. It must reach the stage called crab eyes, where tiny bubbles begin to rise to the surface. To use boiling water would be to scalp the jasmine, destroying the very top notes the gardener worked so hard to preserve during the 3rd scenting. The master selects a gaiwan, a lidded bowl made of celadon porcelain from the Longquan kilns. Its pale green glaze is designed to complement the emerald of the tea and the ghostly white memory of the jasmine. Every movement is a continuation of the gardener's own rhythm, slow, deliberate, and tuned to the frequency of the natural world. As the water is poured, the tea leaves begin to dance. They unfurl slowly, stretching out their limbs as if waking from a long slumber. The steam that rises is a ghost of the garden. It fills the studio, drifting over the inkstones and the scrolls, carrying the scent of the walled courtyard into the heart of the home. The master lifts the lid of the gaiwan just a fraction, allowing the aroma to bloom. This is the breath of the song, a moment of absolute unadulterated beauty that exists only because a man stood in the dark and waited for a flower to speak. The gardener, watching from the shadows, feels a profound sense of closure. His work is no longer in his hands, it is now in the air, in the water, and soon it will be a part of the master's very being. The tea infusion is complete. The master pours the liquid from the celadon gaiwan into a series of small, shallow cups. The tea is not yellow, nor is it green. It is a pale, shimmering gold, like the light of the sun filtered through the wings of a dragonfly. The gardener remains kneeling, a silent shadow in the presence of this transformation. He watches as the master lifts the cup to his lips, but before tasting, the master pauses to appreciate the clinging fragrance on the underside of the lid. This is the ultimate test of the gardener's craft. If the scent is fleeting, the tea is common. If the scent lingers like a memory of a lost love, the tea is divine. The master takes a slow, meditative sip. The tea enters the mouth as a liquid, but it fills the senses as an atmosphere. The gardener can tell by the way the master's shoulders relax that the balance is perfect. The bitterness of the green tea provides the mountain, and the jasmine provides the mist that clings to its peaks. In this small ceramic cup, the entire geography of Hangzhou is distilled. The master sets the cup down and looks toward the gardener. For the first time he speaks, his voice a low rasp that carries the weight of years spent in the imperial archives. He speaks not of the tea, but of the garden, of how the jasmine this year seems to carry a hint of the southern rain. This realization that the weather of a single week can be preserved in a jar is the miracle of the southern song. The gardener feels a flush of quiet pride. He thinks of the moments in the dark when his hands were cold and his eyes were heavy, and he realizes they were worth it. He has created a bridge across time. Even as the dynasty faces the uncertainties of the future, this moment of peace is unassailable. The master invites the gardener to take a cup. This is a rare gesture, a breaking of the traditional hierarchy that governs the estate. The gardener approaches and takes the cup with both hands, his fingers trembling slightly as they touch the warm porcelain. As he tastes his own creation, he is surprised. He does not taste his labor, he tastes the freedom of the garden. He tastes the splash of the koi, the vibration of the temple bell, and the silence of the moon gate. The tea does not taste like a product of the earth. It tastes like a product of the spirit. He realizes that he didn't just pick flowers, he harvested a state of mind. The two men sit in the studio, the scholar and the gardener, united by a fragrance that will be gone within the hour, but will remain in their hearts for the rest of their lives. The steam continues to rise, a white ribbon of jasmine-scented ghost, fading into the rafters of the ancient house. Outside, the world of 1180 continues its relentless march. The markets are full, the canals are crowded with barges, and the philosophers are debating the nature of the way. But here, in this small room, the way has already been found. Sit is in the patience of the hand, the purity of the water, and the soul of the jasmine blossom. The gardener finishes his cup and bows low, his forehead nearly touching the mat. He has completed his service. He rises and backs away, returning to the world of the veranda, leaving the master to his poetry and his peace. The ritual is over, but the garden is already preparing for the next night, and the gardener knows he will be there to meet it. The gardener steps back onto the wooden veranda, the lingering taste of the jasmine tea still coating his palate like a floral silk. The world feels sharper now, the colors of the garden more vivid, as if the tea has cleared the dust from his own vision. Behind him, the scholar master has returned to his silence, perhaps inspired to write the final couplet of a poem that has haunted him all season. The gardener walks slowly, his footsteps echoing softly in the corridor. He is no longer driven by the urgency of the harvest or the anxiety of the scenting process. He has crossed the threshold of completion. He feels a profound sense of Wu Wei, the Taoist principle of effortless action. He did not force the jasmine to scent the tea. He simply created the conditions for it to happen. As you follow the gardener back toward the courtyard, let yourself settle into this rhythm of the 12th century. There is a deep, restorative power in witnessing a task performed with such total devotion. If this journey into the walled gardens of the Song dynasty has provided you with a moment of sanctuary, please consider supporting our work. By subscribing and hitting the like button, you help us bring more of these hidden histories to life. Share this video with someone who needs to hear the silence of the jasmine garden today, and join our community of listeners who find peace in the echoes of the past. Your presence here is the final ingredient in our storytelling. The gardener reaches the edge of the koi pond and pauses. The sun is now high, and the garden is fully illuminated. The mystery of the dawn has been replaced by the clarity of the noon hour. He watches the koi, those living jewels of gold and fire, as they drift lazily through the shadows of the lily pads. They seem untroubled by the passage of time or the weight of empire. To them, the world is the water, the light, and the occasional splash of a falling petal. The gardener feels a kinship with them. He too is a creature of this closed world, a guardian of a beauty that requires walls to exist. He picks up a small handful of fish food, dried shrimp and grain, and tosses it into the water. The surface erupts in a silent kaleidoscope of color as the fish rise to meet the gift. He looks toward the moon gate one last time before heading to his quarters for a much-needed sleep. The gate frames the distant pagoda, which now stands clear against the blue Hangzhou sky. The mist is a memory, and the dragon's teeth buds he picked at dawn are now part of the master's history. He realizes that his life is a series of these cycles, a winding path of fragrance and shadow. He has spent his strength to capture a scent that cannot be seen, yet it is the most real thing he has ever touched. As he pulls the curtain to his small room, the scent of jasmine still clings to his hair and skin, a fragrant ghost that will guard his dreams. He closes his eyes, and the last thing he hears is the distant, rhythmic clack of the bamboo water pipe, marking the heartbeat of a garden that will never truly sleep. The gardener's room is small, tucked away in the corner of the estate where the walls are thick and the ground is cool. It is a space of monastic simplicity, a low bed of woven hemp, a small wooden chest for his few belongings, and a single ceramic vase holding a sprig of pine. As he lies down, the exhaustion he has held at bay for nearly 48 hours finally descends. But it is not a heavy or painful tiredness. It is a hollow, clean fatigue, the kind that follows a labor of love. The air in his room carries the faint, residual scent of the charcoal from the tea stove, mixed with the ever-present perfume of his own hands. He stares at the ceiling tiles, watching the way the midday light reflects off the lime-washed walls, creating shimmering patterns like the surface of the pond. In his mind, he is already thinking of the next moon. The jasmine harvest is a fleeting window in the summer months, and while this batch is complete, the cycle of the garden never truly halts. Soon, the heat of the late summer will give way to the crispness of autumn, and the jasmine vines will begin to pull their energy back into their roots. He will need to prune them with the same care he used to pick them, ensuring that the strength of the plant is preserved through the winter frosts. To be a gardener in the Song Dynasty is to live half a year in the future. Every action today is a seed planted for a tomorrow he may or may not see. This long-term stewardship is a quiet form of faith, a belief that the world will continue to value the scent of a flower and the clarity of a cup of tea. He drifts into a sleep that is deep and dreamless, a state of perfect emptiness. Outside his door, the life of the Hangzhou estate continues in its measured, graceful way. The master's grandchildren run through the corridors with muffled laughter, their silk robes rustling like the bamboo in the wind. A servant sweeps the fallen leaves from the stone paths, the rhythmic swish-swish of the broom acting as a lullaby. The city beyond the walls is loud with the trade of the southern song, the clatter of copper coins, the shouts of sailors on the Grand Canal, the ringing of blacksmiths' hammers, but none of it pierces the sanctuary. The garden is a fortress of the senses, and the gardener is its most loyal soldier. Hours later, the gardener wakes as the shadows begin to lengthen once more. The room is now filled with a soft orange glow as the sun begins its descent. He sits up, feeling a strange sense of displacement. For a moment, he forgets whether it is dawn or dusk, whether he is waking to pick or waking to rest. Then, the scent of his own hands reminds him. The ritual is done. He stands and stretches, his body feeling light and renewed. He goes to the stone basin outside his door and splashes his face with cold water. The shock of the temperature clears the last of the sleep from his mind. He looks out at the courtyard, which is now bathed in the golden magic hour of evening. The jasmine vines are dark now, their white stars hidden within the deep green of the foliage. They look ordinary, almost humble to anyone who did not see them in the moonlight. But the gardener knows their secret. He knows the power they hold to transport a man's soul. He walks toward the kitchen to find a simple meal of rice and pickled vegetables moving through the garden, not as a worker but as a part of the landscape. He passes the moon gate, and for the first time in days he simply stands and looks through it. He is not looking for the best buds or checking the weather. He is simply observing the beauty of the world. The pagoda in the distance is turning into a silhouette against the burning sky. This is the reward for his labor, not the tea itself, but the ability to stand in the stillness of his own creation and feel the pulse of 1180 beating in time with his own heart. As the evening light deepens into a rich burnt amber, the gardener finds himself sitting on the edge of the stone veranda, his feet dangling just above the moss. The meal of rice has warmed his center, and the cool air of the coming night begins to prickle his skin. This is the hour of reflection, a time when the physical demands of the day have subsided and the philosophical weight of his work begins to settle. In the Song Dynasty, a person is defined not by what they own, but by how they align themselves with the Li, the underlying principle of the universe. For the gardener, the Li is found in the way the jasmine vine climbs, seeking the sun while offering its fragrance to the moon. He watches a small bird, a silver eye, flit between the branches of the plum tree. The bird is looking for the last insects of the day, its movements sharp and purposeful. Even this small creature is part of the garden's economy. The gardener realizes that his role is not to control the garden, but to facilitate its natural excellence. He is a servant to the soil. He thinks about the tea leaves he scented. They are now resting in the master's storage jars, wrapped in layers of silk and charcoal to keep the moisture away. Those leaves are now time capsules. A year from now, in the middle of a winter snowstorm, the master can open one of those jars and instantly bring back the humidity and heat of this July evening. This ability to transcend the seasons is the true magic of the tea craft. It is a way for humans to hold on to the fleeting beauty of the world. The gardener looks at his own hands, the skin stained slightly dark by the tannin of the tea and the dirt of the garden. These hands are the instruments of that preservation. He feels a quiet, humble satisfaction. He is not a scholar who writes the history books, nor an emperor who draws the maps, yet he has captured a piece of the eternal. The jasmine will bloom again, the seasons will turn, and the dynasty may rise or fall, but the standard of beauty he has upheld today is something that exists outside of time. The garden is now almost entirely in shadow. The heavenly well above the courtyard shows a sky of deep indigo, where the first stars are beginning to pierce through the veil. The jasmine scent is rising again, but tonight the gardener is not there to harvest it. He lets the fragrance wander where it will, over the walls, into the master's bedroom and out toward the distant lake. Tonight, the flowers belong to themselves. He stands up, his shadow merging with the darkness of the pillars. He will go to bed early tonight, for even though the ritual is over, the garden remains. Tomorrow there will be weeds to pull, paths to sweep, and the endless, quiet conversation with the earth to continue. In the year 1180, in the heart of Hangzhou, the gardener closes his eyes, content to be a small, silent part of a much larger, beautiful whole. The cycle of the jasmine ritual has finally come to a complete rest, yet the gardener knows that in the world of the southern song, rest is merely the preparation for a new beginning. He wakes the next morning to the sound of soft rain, the plum rains that characterize the season in Hangzhou. The garden looks different today. The vibrant, sharp whites and greens are muted by a grey, misty veil. The rain taps a rhythmic, hollow beat against the broad leaves of the lotus in the pond, and the jasmine vines hang heavy with moisture, their scent dampened but not extinguished. For the gardener, this rain is a blessing. It washes the dust of the labour away, feeding the roots that have given so much of their essence over the last few nights. He walks through the garden with an oiled paper umbrella, the yellow light of the morning filtering through its bamboo ribs. He is no longer looking for flowers to pick. Instead, he is checking the drainage around the Taihu stones and ensuring the moss isn't washed away by the runoff. This is the unglamorous side of his craft, the maintenance of the stage upon which the beauty performs. He passes the tea preparation room and sees a servant cleaning the ceramic vats. The room is being aired out, the heavy fragrance being replaced by the clean, metallic scent of the rain. The ritual is now a memory, stored away in the jars of tea and the scrolls of the master. As he reaches the moon gate, he pauses to look back at the estate. He thinks of the generations of gardeners who stood exactly where he is standing, and those who will stand here long after he is gone. In the year 1180, there is a sense that the world is both fragile and eternal. The beauty they create is delicate, susceptible to the whims of politics and nature, yet the spirit of the work is indestructible. As long as there is a hand to plant and a heart to wait, the jasmine will always find its way into the tea. We thank you for joining us on this long sensory journey through the walled gardens of history. If this exploration of the Song Dynasty has brought you peace, we invite you to stay with us for future stories. This concludes our tale of the jasmine and the gardener. May your sleep be as deep as the silence of the courtyard, and your dreams as fragrant as the scholar's cup. Sleepy History with Wesley is honored to be your guide through the quiet corners of the past until the next moon rises. Sleep well. The gardener closes the gate softly, the click of the latch swallowed by the sound of the rain. He heads back toward the warmth of the kitchens, a simple man who for a few nights held the stars in his basket and the moon in his hands. The garden continues its slow, rhythmic breathing, growing, waiting, and existing in a state of perfect, rain-washed grace. The rainy season lingers, turning the Song Dynasty estate into a world of liquid jade. The gardener spends his days under the eaves of the storage sheds, mending the bamboo sieves and weaving new wicker baskets. Though the intense labor of the scenting is over, the story of the jasmine tea is entering its most critical phase, the seasoning of the spirit. In the dark, cool corners of the cellar, the jars sit in absolute stillness. Within those sealed vessels, the tea leaves are performing a final, slow alchemy. The fragrance of the flowers, once a vibrant and external force, is now being driven deep into the heart of the tea's cellular structure. It is becoming a permanent union, a marriage of mountain and garden that no amount of time can undo. The gardener knows that the tea he made today will not reach its full maturity for several months. In the year 1180, quality is measured in patience. He thinks of the merchant ships that will eventually carry some of this tea north along the Grand Canal or south toward the great ports of Hangzhou. Some of it might even find its way into the hands of a traveler heading toward the distant Silk Road. It is a strange and humbling thought. A person thousands of miles away who has never seen this specific moon gate or heard the splash of these koi, will one day lift a cup and breathe in the soul of this garden. They will taste the rain he is watching now, and the sunlight he captured 3 nights ago. As he works on a broken basket, he realizes that the gardener's life is one of constant giving. He nurtures the plants so they may give their flowers. He tends the fire so it may give its heat. He labors through the night so the master may find his peace. Yet in this giving, he finds himself full. He does not need the silk robes or the fame of the scholar. His reward is the quietude of the rain on the roof and the knowledge that he has upheld a standard of excellence that spans centuries. He looks at his hands, calloused, stained, and steady, and sees them not as the hands of a servant but as the hands of a bridge builder. He connects the raw, wild energy of nature to the refined, quiet world of human culture. The rain begins to thin, and a pale, watery sun attempts to break through the clouds. The garden begins to steam, a ghostly mist rising from the wet stones and the saturated soil. The gardener stands and walks to the edge of the shed, letting a few stray drops fall onto his palm. The world feels new, as if the intense effort of the past week has been washed away to make room for something else. Every cycle has its end, and every end is merely the soil for the next beginning. He turns his gaze toward the far corner of the estate where the chrysanthemums are starting to sprout. Their season is next. He will prepare the soil, he will wait for the frost, and he will begin the dance all over again. In the heart of the southern song, the rhythm of life is the only true music, and the gardener is content to be one of its most faithful players. The steam rising from the wet earth creates a veil of dragon's breath mist across the courtyard. As the sun finally conquers the clouds, the gardener sets aside his weaving tools and walks toward the jasmine trellis. The vines are heavy, dripping with crystal droplets that catch the light like scattered diamonds. Though the harvest is finished, the gardener's relationship with the plants does not end with the picking. He moves among them now as a physician would, checking for broken stems or leaves turned yellow by the sudden deluge. He speaks to them in a low murmur, not in words, but in the language of intent, thanking them for the abundance they surrendered in the dark. The estate's steward approaches from the stone bridge, his silken robes held high to avoid the puddles. He carries a small wooden box, polished to a high sheen. This is the seed of recognition. Within the box is a small stipend of silver coins and a piece of high-quality ink soot, a gift from the master for the successful scenting. In the hierarchy of the southern song, such a gesture is significant. It acknowledges that the gardener is not merely a common laborer, but a fangshi, a master of a specific occult craft. The gardener receives the box with a deep bow, but his eyes remain fixed on the damp earth. To him, the silver is useful, but the true reward is the fact that the tea was right. It was balanced. It was true to the spirit of 1180. As the steward departs, the gardener places the box in his pocket and returns to his task. He begins to clear the fallen petals that have been beaten down by the rain. These white fragments are now turning brown, merging back into the soil. From the earth to the cup and back to the earth, he thinks. This circularity is the comfort of his life. He knows that the master will eventually drink all the tea, the jars will stand empty, and the winter will come to strip the garden bare. But for now, the air is warm, the water is sweet, and the jasmine is already gathering its strength for the next lunar cycle. He spends the rest of the afternoon in a state of quiet contemplation. He watches the shadows of the bamboo lengthen across the whitewashed walls, a shifting ink painting that no artist could ever truly replicate. He realizes that his greatest work is not the tea itself, but the silence he helps protect. Within these walls, the chaos of the world, the wars on the borders, the rising taxes, the intrigues of the court, cannot enter. He is the guardian of a small, perfect peace. As the evening bell sounds from the temple on the hill, he stands at the moon gate, a solitary figure framed by the ancient stone. The day is done, the rain has passed, and the jasmine garden remains a sanctuary of the soul. The twilight of 1180 descends upon Hangzhou with a peculiar golden clarity. The gardener, now rested and restored by the rhythmic sounds of the rain, finds himself drawn back to the koi pond. The water has cleared, and the sediment stirred up by the storm has settled into the depths. He stands on the small arched bridge, leaning his weight against the cool stone railing. Below him, the koi move with a renewed vigor, their scales flashing like molten copper in the fading light. He realizes that even the fish have a role in the tea's journey. Their movement aerates the water, and their presence brings a meditative stillness to the garden that eventually finds its way into the gardener's own temperament. He reaches into his sleeve and pulls out the piece of ink, soot gifted by the master. It is smooth and cold, smelling faintly of musk and ancient forests. In the Song Dynasty, ink is not just a tool for writing, it is a cousin to tea. Both are products of fire and water. Both require a focused mind to prepare, and both leave a lasting mark on the world. He decides that tomorrow he will use a small portion of his silver to buy a new pruning shear from the blacksmith near the West Lake. A craftsman is only as good as the edge of his blade, and the jasmine vines deserve a clean cut that heals quickly, leaving no room for decay. As the first owls begin to call from the camphor trees, the gardener feels a sense of deep integration. He is no longer just a man working in a garden, he is a component of the garden itself. His breath moves with the wind, his blood flows with the water, and his spirit is scented by the jasmine. This is the great harmony that the Taoist sages spoke of, a state where the self vanishes into the task. He looks up at the stars, which are now brilliant and sharp in the washed sky. They look like the jasmine buds he picked, scattered across the dark indigo silk of the heavens. He smiles to himself, a small private gesture of content. He turns to walk back to his quarters, but he stops one last time by the jasmine trellis. He reaches out and gently strokes a single green leaf. It is firm and full of life. The harvest was successful, the master is pleased, and the tea is resting. He has done his duty to the ancestors and to the earth. The night air is cool and carries the promise of a peaceful sleep. Tomorrow will bring new chores, new challenges, and the slow, inevitable turn toward autumn, but tonight the world is perfect. The gardener steps across his threshold, closes the wooden door, and leaves the moon to watch over the silent, fragrant kingdom he has helped to create. The following morning brings a crispness to the air that suggests the peak of summer has finally crested. The gardener rises with the sun, but instead of the frantic energy of the harvest, he moves with a grounded, steady pace. Today is a day for the return to the root. He carries a wooden bucket filled with a mixture of fermented bean cake and bone meal, a rich, pungent fertilizer that will replenish the nutrients the jasmine vines surrendered to create their aromatic blossoms. As he kneels in the dirt, digging small trenches near the base of the plants, he feels the soil's damp warmth. To the uninitiated, this is mere manual labor, but to the gardener, this is the most profound part of the dialogue. You cannot take from the earth without giving back. To do so would be to break the gong or the merit of the garden. As he works, the master's youngest grandson wanders into the courtyard, chasing a kite made of thin bamboo and crimson silk. The boy stops near the gardener, watching the dirt-stained hands move with precision. In the innocence of the child's gaze, the gardener sees the future of the Song dynasty. He realizes that the boy will grow up tasting the tea he is preparing now, and perhaps decades later the boy will sit in the same studio and remember the scent of jasmine as the smell of his childhood. The gardener pauses and hands the boy a small, smooth pebble from the pond, a dragon's scale stone. The boy beams and runs off, his laughter echoing against the silent walls. This brief interaction is a reminder that the garden is not just a place of production, but a vessel for memory. By midday, the feeding of the vines is complete. The gardener washes his hands at the stone basin, watching the dark soil swirl and disappear into the drain. He decides it is time to check on the mother batch in the cellar. He descends the stone steps into the cool subterranean dark where the large ceramic jars are stored. Here the air is still and heavy with the scent of cured tea. He places his ear against one of the jars. There is no sound, yet he can feel the chi, the life force, settling. The tea is no longer a collection of leaves and flowers. It has become a singular entity. It is stable. It is deep. He nods to himself, satisfied that the fire of the drying process has faded into a civilized warmth. Returning to the surface, the gardener finds the master sitting on the veranda, watching the wind play through the bamboo. They do not speak, for the tea they shared the day before has already said everything that needed to be said. The master simply raises a hand in a brief, elegant gesture of greeting. It is enough. In this world of 1180, silence is the highest form of communication. The gardener goes to the tool shed to sharpen his new shears, the rhythmic shri-shri of the whetstone providing a heartbeat for the afternoon. He is preparing for the pruning, for the maintenance, and for the eventual sleep of the plants. The great work of the jasmine is over, but the small work of the life well lived continues, one breath and one leaf at a time. The sun hangs suspended at its zenith, casting shortened shadows that pool like ink beneath the eaves of the estate. The gardener sits in the shade of a weeping willow, the air around him humming with the vibration of cicadas, a sound that in the southern song is the very herald of high summer's persistence. He holds the new shears in his lap, the polished steel reflecting a splinter of the sky. His mind is at ease, drifting like the white clouds over the West Lake. He thinks of the jars in the cellar and realizes that the tea's journey is now out of his hands and in the hands of time. It is a transition that every creator must eventually make, the moment when the work becomes independent of the maker. As the heat of the afternoon settles, a sense of profound stillness envelops the garden. If this journey through the sensory world of 1180 has helped you find your own center, we invite you to stay a while longer. Your support through likes and subscriptions is the water that allows our storytelling to grow. Tell us in the comments, does the thought of a hidden garden bring you peace, or do you prefer the open vistas of the mountains? Your thoughts are the echoes that keep these historical tales alive in the modern age. The gardener rises and walks toward the back of the estate where the wall of lingering fragrance stands. Here the air is slightly cooler, trapped by the thick masonry and the dense ivy. He notices a single, late-blooming jasmine flower that had hidden itself beneath a broad leaf. It is small, almost translucent, and it has bloomed late, missing the great harvest. He does not pick it. Instead, he leans in and inhales its solitary scent. It is sharp, sweet, and incredibly clear. In this one flower, he finds the essence of the thousands he picked before. It is a reminder that even the smallest part of nature contains the whole. He leaves the flower where it is, a secret treasure for the garden to keep for itself. As the shadows begin to stretch once more, reaching toward the east, the gardener returns to his small room. He lights a single stick of incense, the smoke rising in a straight, unwavering line before curling into the rafters. He sits on his bed and opens a small weathered ledger. In it, he records the details of this year's jasmine harvest, the dates of the moons, the weight of the rainfall, the specific spirit of the scent, This ledger is his legacy, a map for the gardener who will follow him 50 years from now. He writes with a steady hand, his calligraphy simple but honest. When he finishes, he closes the book and places it back in his chest. The day is leaning toward its end, and the gardener is ready to follow it into the dark. The temple bell rings again, its deep bronze voice rolling over the hills and through the moon gate. It is the sound of the world closing its eyes. The gardener walks to his window and looks out at the garden one last time before the light fails. The jasmine vines are now just dark shapes. The pond is a mirror for the first stars, and the master's house is a lantern of soft flickering orange. Everything is as it should be. The ritual of the tea, the labor of the night, and the peace of the day have all merged into a single seamless memory. In the year 1180, in the heart of a world that is always changing, the gardener has found the one thing that remains, the quiet, fragrant truth of the present moment. The night is no longer a theatre of labor, but a cathedral of rest. The gardener lies upon his hemp mat, his breathing synchronized with the slow, rhythmic creak of the bamboo grove beyond his wall. The intense humidity of the previous days has broken, replaced by a dry, cooling breeze that carries the scent of lake water and distant pine. In this darkness, his senses remain sharp, but they are no longer searching. He is not listening for the opening of a bud or the crackle of a drying fire. He is simply existing within the space he has tended. He realizes that a garden is not just a collection of plants, but a vessel for the passage of time. In the quiet of the third watch, his mind drifts back to the first time he ever smelled jasmine as a young apprentice. He remembers his own master telling him that the flower does not give its scent for the sake of man, but as a prayer to the moon. To harvest it is to steal a piece of that prayer, and therefore the gardener must offer his own life in service to the plant as a form of restitution. Now, decades later, he understands the weight of that debt. He has given his youth, his sleep, and the strength of his back to these vines, and in return, they have given him a purpose that transcends the petty concerns of the marketplace. He is a part of the great chain of scent, a lineage of invisible beauty. The moon, now a waning slyer, hangs over the pagoda, casting long skeletal shadows across the courtyard. The gardener watches the light move across his floor, a slow-motion clock of silver. He thinks of the master's poem, the one that mentioned the jasmine-scented ghost of the southern song. He wonders if, in 1,000 years, anyone will still understand the discipline required to capture a scent. Will they know the temperature of a crab-eye bubble? Will they understand why a flower must be picked before the sun touches it? He smiles into the dark, realizing it doesn't matter. The scent itself is the truth. It doesn't require a witness to be perfect. As the pre-dawn light begins to bleed into the horizon, the gardener does not rise with the usual start. He allows himself the luxury of watching the world wake up from his bed. The grey light reveals the dust motes dancing in the air of his room, tiny particles of earth and silk that seem to vibrate with the coming day. He feels a profound lightness in his chest. The jars are sealed, the vines are fed, and the cycle has found its center. He has achieved what the scholars call jing, or quietude. It is not an absence of noise, but a harmony of the spirit. He eventually rises and walks to the kitchen to boil a small pot of plain water. He does not drink the jasmine tea today. That is for the master and the guests. For himself, the plain water is enough. It is clean, it is honest, and it allows him to taste the residual sweetness of the garden that still lingers in his own breath. He stands on the veranda, the steam from his cup rising to meet the morning mist. The jasmine vines are there, waiting for the sun, silent and strong. The year 1180 continues its journey, and the gardener, with a steady hand and a peaceful heart, prepares to step out into the light and begin the quiet work of another day. The morning of the following week arrives with a shift in the atmosphere. The plum rains have fully retreated, leaving behind a sky so blue it looks like polished sapphire. The gardener, now moving with a restored vitality, decides that today is the day for the final sealing. While the tea has been resting in the cellar, it is now time to transfer the most precious portions into small airtight porcelain canisters decorated with blue and white motifs of cranes and clouds. These canisters are destined for the master's private collection, reserved for the most honored guests or perhaps as a tribute to the imperial court in Linan. He carries the porcelain jars to the central table of the preparation room. The space is now cool and dry, the humidity of the scenting nights a distant memory. As he opens the large ceramic vat, the fragrance that greets him is no longer a sharp floral explosion. Instead, it has deepened into a mellow, sophisticated perfume that smells of honey, toasted grain, and the very essence of the jasmine soul. The leaves have darkened slightly, absorbing the oils until they shimmer with a dull, waxy luster. This is the sign of a perfect fixation. He uses a small silver shovel to fill the porcelain jars, the tea clinking like precious stones against the glazed walls. As he works, the gardener reflects on the nature of permanence. In the Song Dynasty, life is often compared to a floating weed, subject to the currents of fate. Yet in this tea he has created something that defies the ephemeral. If stored correctly, this fragrance will remain unchanged for years. He imagines a scholar opening this jar in a distant winter, perhaps during a time of personal sorrow or political upheaval. The scent will act as a key, unlocking a door to this specific summer day in 1180. To provide such a sanctuary for a future stranger is the gardener's highest calling. He is not just a cultivator of plants, he is a curator of peace. He seals the porcelain lids with beeswax and strips of red silk, pressing his own thumbprint into the warm wax as a silent mark of his craftsmanship. He then carries the finished jars to the master's study. The master is not there, but the room is filled with the scent of old books and the steady ticking of a water clock. The gardener places the jars on the rosewood shelf, lining them up with the precision of a soldier. He stands back for a moment, looking at the result of his labor. The physical flowers are gone, returned to the earth, but their spirit is now captured in these elegant vessels. Returning to the garden, he finds the air still and expectant. The midsummer heat is beginning to build, and the cicadas have started their rhythmic chanting once more. He picks up his broom and begins to sweep the stone path leading to the moon gate. The work is simple, repetitive, and meditative. With each stroke of the bamboo bristles, he clears away the debris of the past to make room for the present. The jasmine ritual has reached its true conclusion, and the gardener feels a sense of profound completion. He is no longer the man who picks flowers in the dark. He is the man who walks in the light, content to know that even in a world of change, some things like the scent of a perfect cup of tea are eternal. The sun begins its slow descent, painting the whitewashed walls of the estate in shades of ochre and violet. The gardener stands by the koi pond, his shadow stretching long and thin across the water's surface. The frantic pace of the scenting season has officially given way to the time of observation. In the Southern Song philosophy, this is the period where one does not act upon the world, but allows the world to act upon the self. He watches a single leaf from the willow tree spiral downward, landing softly on the water. A large crimson koi rises to investigate, its bubbles breaking the mirror-like stillness before it sinks back into the depths. He thinks about the porcelain jars he sealed earlier. They are now silent sentinels on the master's shelf, holding within them the heat of the sun and the coolness of the moon. He realizes that his life, much like the tea, is a process of refinement. Each year of tending the garden, each night of lost sleep, and each season of rain has layered his spirit with a quiet resilience. He is no longer the impetuous youth who sought to control every bloom. He has become the elder who understands that true beauty is often found in the surrender to the natural order. In 1180, in a society defined by rigid hierarchies, the garden is the only place where he feels truly sovereign. As the first fireflies begin to blink in the tall grass near the walls, the gardener feels a familiar pull toward the jasmine trellis. He isn't there to work, but to simply sit. The fragrance is faint now, a mere whisper of its former self, yet it is enough to trigger a cascade of memories. He remembers the calloused hands of his father teaching him how to prune, and the soft voice of the master praising the clarity of a brew. These ghosts of the past are not haunting, they are companions. They remind him that he is part of a tapestry that stretches back to the dawn of the empire, and will continue as long as the earth remains fertile. The night air grows cooler, carrying the scent of wood smoke from the kitchens where the evening meal is being prepared. The gardener stands and stretches his weary limbs, feeling the pleasant ache of a day well spent. He walks toward his small room, his footsteps light on the stone path. He stops at the moon gate one last time, looking through the circular frame at the distant hills, now shrouded in a blue-grey haze. The world is settling into its nocturnal rhythm. He closes the gate with a gentle touch, the latch clicking with a finality that signals the end of this chapter. He has harvested the scent, he has shared the tea, and he has found his peace. Tomorrow, the sun will rise on a garden that is slightly different, and he will be there to meet it with the same quiet devotion that has defined his life in the golden age of the song. As the deep violet of night finally settles over the estate, the gardener sits by his small window, the flickering light of a single oil lamp casting dancing shadows against the walls. He picks up his sharpening stone once more, but his hands move with a slow, contemplative rhythm rather than the urgency of preparation. He is thinking about the afterglow, the period of time after a great work is completed when the soul must find its way back to the mundane. In the year 1180, the transition from the extraordinary to the ordinary is considered a sacred path. One cannot live forever in the peak of the jasmine's bloom. One must learn to find the same holiness in the sweeping of dust and the carrying of water. He looks at his bowl of plain water reflecting the tiny flame of his lamp. In its reflection, he sees the entire universe of the garden. He realizes that the tea he created is a form of communication that transcends speech. It is a letter written in scent and taste addressed to the future. Every jar he sealed is a promise that beauty can be preserved, that effort is not in vain, and that the harmony of a single summer night can be summoned at will by anyone with a kettle and a cup. This realization brings a profound sense of weightlessness to his heart. He has fulfilled his contract with the seasons. The wind picks up, rustling the bamboo grove with a sound like falling silk. It is a cooling breeze, the kind that marks the true turning of the month. The gardener blows out his lamp, letting the natural starlight take over the room. He lies down, the scent of the garden still a faint, ghostly presence in his clothes. He thinks of the master's grandchildren, the koi in the pond, and the silent jasmine vines outside. They are all dreaming now, woven together by the invisible threads of the estate's life. He closes his eyes, drifting into a sleep that is as deep and quiet as the roots of the ancient camphor tree. In the silence of the room, the story of the jasmine harvest of 1180 reaches its true stillness. The work is done. The tea is resting. The gardener is at peace. As you drift toward your own sleep, let the image of this moonlit garden be your sanctuary. Carry the scent of the jasmine into your dreams, and know that, like the gardener, you have found a place of rest in the long, winding corridor of history. Sleepy History with Wesley bids you a peaceful night. The stars are bright, the garden is quiet, and all is well in the heart of the song. Good night. The first light of a new dawn breaks over the horizon, but it is not the pale gold of the jasmine nights. It is the soft, milky white of an early autumn morning. The gardener wakes without the aid of the temple bell, his body having memorized the pulse of the sun. He steps outside his room and feels a new sharpness in the air. The dew on the grass is heavier now, almost frost-like in its coldness. The jasmine vines, once the protagonists of this grand seasonal drama, have begun to settle into a deep vegetative silence. Their leaves are a darker, more tired green, and the few remaining buds are small and tightly closed, as if protecting the last of their warmth from the approaching cold. He walks to the center of the courtyard and performs a slow series of stretches, his joints popping like dry bamboo. There is a profound sense of the day after lingering in the air. The vats are clean, the sieves are stacked, and the master's study is quiet. In the Southern song, this transition is called the Great Returning. It is the moment when the energy of the world shifts from expansion to contraction, from the flower back to the root. The gardener finds a strange comfort in this. If the world stayed in bloom forever, the bloom would cease to be a miracle. It is the inevitable fading that gives the scent its value. He spends the morning meticulously cleaning his tools. He oils the blades of his shears with camellia oil to prevent rust, wraps his baskets in oiled cloth to keep out the damp, and sweeps the charcoal ash from the hearth one final time. Every movement is a gesture of gratitude. He is tucking the garden into bed, preparing it for the long sleep of winter. He knows that his own role will now shift from that of an artist to that of a guardian. He will spend the coming months protecting the roots from the frost and ensuring the soil remains rich, waiting for the wheel of the year to bring the heat of summer back once more. As the sun climbs higher, the gardener takes a final walk to the moon gate. He looks at the garden not as a workplace, but as a masterpiece he has helped to sign. The tea is in the jars, the story is in the ledger, and the peace is in his soul. He has navigated the year 1180 with the grace of a falling leaf. He turns his back on the gate and heads toward the humble tasks of the new day, a silent smile on his face. The jasmine harvest is over, but the garden is eternal. The master of the scent has become the master of himself. The morning progresses and the gardener finds himself at the edge of the estate's boundary, where the cultivated moss meets the wilder thickets of bamboo. The air here is different, less perfumed by human intent and more redolent of the damp ancient earth. He carries a small wooden rake, but he does not use it immediately. Instead, he stands and listens. In the distance, he can hear the faint, melodic chanting of the monks from the monastery on the hillside. It is a reminder that while he tends to the physical body of the garden, others tend to the spirit of the empire. In the southern song, these two worlds are never truly separate. A well-brewed cup of tea is considered a form of meditation in itself. He begins to clear the fallen bamboo leaves, their papery texture rustling against the stone. As he works, his mind drifts to the concept of enmei, the prolongation of life. He realizes that by capturing the jasmine's essence in the tea, he has extended the life of those fleeting blossoms far beyond their natural span. He has given them a second existence, one that will live on in the memories and spirits of those who drink it. This is the gardener's alchemy, the transformation of the perishable into the lasting. He feels a deep, quiet pride in being the steward of this transformation. The sun is now warm on his back, a gentle heat that lacks the biting intensity of the previous weeks. He stops to watch a dragonfly, its wings a blur of iridescent blue, as it hovers over the stone lantern. It is a tiny, perfect piece of the world, existing for a single season yet perfect in its design. The gardener reflects on his own life, small in the grand scale of the dynasty, yet essential to the harmony of this specific patch of earth. He does not wish for the life of a general or a high official, to be the one who knows when the jasmine is ready, to be the one who understands the language of the wind and the soil, is a wealth that gold cannot buy. By midday the boundary is cleared. He returns to the main courtyard and sees the master's head servant preparing a small tray with 2 porcelain cups. It seems the master is sharing the first offering of the new jasmine tea with a visiting calligrapher. The gardener watches from the shadows of the corridor as the tea is poured. He sees the steam rise in a delicate white plume, and he knows even from a distance that the fragrance is perfect. He doesn't need to taste it. The way the visitors close their eyes as they lift the cups tells him everything. His work is done, and it is good. He turns away, heading back to the quiet solitude of the tool shed, content to remain the nameless architect of their joy. The late afternoon light filters through the bamboo leaves, casting long rhythmic stripes across the gardener's path. He finds himself drawn to the well of infinite reflection, a small stone-lined spring at the back of the property. The water here is cold and incredibly pure, the same water he used to temper the clay for the tea stove. As he peers into the surface, he sees a man whose face is etched with the lines of many seasons, yet whose eyes remain clear. In the year 1180, a person's face is said to be a map of their Tao, the way they have walked through life. He sees no regret in his reflection, only the quiet fatigue of a harvest well reaped. He takes a small dipper and drinks. The water is crisp, tasting of deep earth and ancient stone. It cleanses the lingering sweetness of the tea from his palate, returning him to a state of neutral readiness. He thinks about the way of tea, cha dao, that is beginning to take root in the culture of the song. It is more than just a drink. It is a philosophy of simplicity, respect, and tranquility. He realizes that by tending the jasmine, he has been a priest in this temple of the mundane. He has helped create the medium through which people find their own moments of stillness. A soft breeze stirs the weeping willow, its branches brushing against the surface of the well. The gardener stands and begins his final walk of the day. He passes the nursery where the young jasmine cuttings are housed. These are the children of the great vines, the next generation that will carry the scent forward into the years 1882 and beyond. He stops to adjust a bamboo stake, ensuring a young shoot grows straight toward the sky. His care is as tender for these non-blooming infants as it was for the heavy-laden mothers. Stewardship, he knows, has no season of rest. As the sun dips below the horizon, the estate is bathed in a profound indigo silence. The lamps are lit in the main hall, flickering like warm embers in the growing dark. The gardener returns to his room, his heart full of the quiet satisfaction that comes from a completed cycle. He sits on his mat, listening to the first crickets of the evening. They take up the song where the cicadas left off, a lower, more melodic vibration. He closes his eyes, his mind a blank slate, ready for the dreams that only a peaceful soul can host. The story of the jasmine has settled into the earth, but the spirit of the gardener remains awake, a silent flame in the heart of the night. The twilight of the southern song deepens into a velvet blue, and the gardener finds himself standing at the edge of the master's study, hidden by the shadows of the eaves. Inside, the calligrapher has finished his tea and is now dipping a brush into the very ink the gardener admired earlier. The brush moves with the same fluid grace as the pouring of the water. On the white silk scroll, characters begin to bloom, words describing the fleeting fragrance and the virtue of the hidden root. The gardener realizes that while the scholar captures the garden in ink and the master captures it in memory, he is the only one who has captured it in his skin, his lungs, and the marrow of his bones. He retreats into the absolute darkness of the garden's furthest corner. Here, away from the lanterns and the voices, the world is primordial. He can smell the damp decay of the compost pile, the black gold which is the secret origin of all the jasmine's sweetness. This is the paradox he loves most, that the most ethereal fragrance in the empire begins with the most humble, earthy transformation. He kneels and runs his hand over the soil. It is warm, breathing with the life of 1,000 invisible creatures. In the year 1180, there is no chemistry, only the observation of nature's breath. And tonight, the breath of the earth is steady and strong. The moon rises higher, a silver sickle harvesting the clouds. The gardener feels a sense of profound wu-wei, the art of doing nothing that leaves nothing undone. The harvest is finished, the tea is aging, and the garden is prepared. There is nothing left to strive for. He stands and walks back toward his quarters, his steps silent on the moss. He stops at the stone basin to splash cold water on his face. The water reflects the stars, and for a moment he feels as though he is washing his face in the cosmos itself. As he finally lies down on his mat, the silence of the estate becomes a tangible presence, like a heavy silk blanket. He thinks of the distance between the root and the cup, and the small, steady bridge he has built between them. He is tired, but it is a good tiredness, the kind that comes from being perfectly used for a worthy purpose. He allows his thoughts to dissolve into the sound of the wind in the bamboo. The jasmine harvest of 1180 has passed into the annals of the house, and the gardener, wrapped in the peace of a job well done, surrenders himself to the timeless embrace of sleep. The transition from the deep of night to the first grey light of the following day is almost imperceptible in the gardener's quarters. He does not wake to a sudden realization of duty, but rather to a lingering sense of continuity. The year 1180 is progressing, and while the event of the jasmine scenting has concluded, the life of the garden remains an ongoing dialogue. He stands in his doorway watching the mist coil around the bases of the stone pagodas. It is a quiet morning, the kind where the world feels as though it is holding its breath before the next season begins to speak. He decides that today's task is one of invisible labor. He heads to the storage barn and retrieves a small jar of refined wood oil and a soft cloth. He spends several hours moving through the garden, not tending to the plants, but to the structures that support them. He oils the cedar posts of the trellis, the wood drinking in the moisture with a thirsty hiss. He polishes the bronze rings on the garden gates until they catch the morning sun. This is the act of maintaining the vessel. In the philosophy of the Southern song, a beautiful thing must be housed in a well-cared-for space, or the beauty will eventually feel neglected and depart. By mid-morning, a young servant girl from the main house approaches him. She carries a small lacquer tray with a bowl of congee and a single pickled plum, his breakfast. She looks at the jasmine vines, then at the gardener, her eyes full of a quiet curiosity. "Does the garden miss the flowers?" she asks softly. The gardener smiles, a slow unfolding of his weathered features. "The garden does not miss what it has become," he replies. "The flowers are now in the tea, and the tea is in the master. Nothing is lost. It has only changed its shape." The girl nods, perhaps not fully understanding, but feeling the weight of the truth in his voice. The gardener eats his simple meal sitting on the edge of the stone path. The pickled plum is tart, snapping his senses back into focus. He thinks about the journey of the tea leaves, how they were plucked in the mist of the mountains, transported by river, dried by fire, and finally scented by his own hand. It is a journey of thousands of miles and hundreds of hands. He is just one link in a golden chain. As he finishes his breakfast, he feels a renewed sense of vigor. The jasmine cycle is over, but the garden is already whispering about the autumn chrysanthemums. He stands, picks up his cloth and oil, and continues his work. There is always more to preserve, more to protect, and more to love in this small, walled kingdom of the song. As the sun reaches its midday peak, the gardener moves to the eastern wall of the estate, where the shadows of the ancient ginkgo trees offer a respite from the climbing heat. He sits on a low stone stool, his hands resting on his knees. He is practicing the art of stillness, a discipline as vital as the pruning or the watering. In 1180, it is believed that a gardener who cannot sit still will eventually project his own restlessness onto the plants, causing them to grow erratic and weak. He closes his eyes and focuses on the internal landscape, feeling the rhythmic pulse of the garden's life force resonating within his own chest. A sudden, sharp cry of a crane from the nearby marshland breaks his meditation. He opens his eyes to see the bird soaring high above, its white wings stark against the deep azure of the sky. It is an omen of longevity and wisdom. The gardener takes this as a sign that the season of the spirit has successfully transitioned into the season of wisdom. The wisdom of the garden is simple. Everything has its time, and to fight against the fading is as foolish as to fight against the dawn. He looks at the jasmine vines, their branches now bare of blossoms but thick with the potential of next year's life. They are resting in the wisdom of their own cycles. In the afternoon, the gardener begins to prepare the winter mulch. He mixes dried leaves, rice husks, and the spent jasmine petals that were rejected during the final winnowing of the tea. Even these failures have a purpose. They will return to the soil to nourish the very roots that bore them. This is the ultimate economy of the Southern Song Estate. Nothing is wasted, and every ending is repurposed as a beginning. He spreads the mixture thick at the base of the jasmine, a warm blanket to shield the roots from the coming frosts of the 11th month. He works with a quiet efficiency, his movements a dance of utility and grace. The light begins to turn amber as the day leans toward evening. The gardener stands and looks over the entirety of his domain. He sees the meticulously oiled wood, the polished bronze, the fed soil, and the sleeping vines. He feels a sense of profound integration. He is no longer a man serving a master. He is a soul serving the earth, and the earth has responded with a bounty of scent and peace. He walks back toward his small room, his shadow a long dark line on the golden stones. He has done more than grow a garden. He has cultivated a sanctuary for the human spirit in a world of constant change. As the first star appears in the twilight, he bows his head in a silent prayer of gratitude to the jasmine, the sun, and the steady, guiding hand of time. As night settles once more over the year 1180, the gardener finds a final moment of reflection before the candle of the day is fully extinguished. He sits at his wooden table, the surface worn smooth by years of such quiet nights. In his hand he holds a single dried jasmine bud that had fallen into the hem of his robe during the height of the scenting. It is brittle now, a pale ghost of the ivory star it once was. He crushes it gently between his thumb and forefinger. Even in its death, even after being dried and forgotten, it releases a faint, lingering trail of sweetness. It is the residual virtue, the idea that a life lived well leaves a fragrance behind long after the body has withered. He thinks of the master in the high hall, perhaps at this very moment sipping the tea that they created together. He thinks of the merchant who will buy a small tin of this harvest and carry it to the northern borders, and the lady who will find solace in its scent during a long winter night. The gardener is the silent architect of all these future moments. He realizes that he is not just a servant of the Song dynasty, he is a weaver of the invisible threads that hold the human heart together. This is his true harvest, not the tea, but the connection. The moon is a perfect circle tonight, reflecting in the stone basin outside his door. The gardener walks out and looks at the reflection, then up at the sky. He feels a sense of completion so deep it borders on the divine. The garden is silent, the vines are tucked under their mulch, and the jars of tea are safe in the cellar. He has navigated the seasonal transition with the skill of a master mariner. The story of the 1108 Jasmine harvest is no longer a task to be performed. It has become a part of the history of the earth itself. With a final deep breath of the cooling air, the gardener retreats to his mat. He blows out the small oil lamp, and the darkness that rushes in is not cold, but welcoming. It is the darkness of the soil, the darkness of the womb, and the darkness of a dreamless restorative sleep. As he closes his eyes, the world of the southern song continues to spin silently through the stars. The work is done, the peace is earned, and the jasmine remains a whispered promise of the spring to come. Good night to the garden, and good night to the year. The following dawn brings a change in the light, a silver-grey hue that signals the true onset of the white dew season. The gardener steps out into the courtyard, noticing that the dew has indeed turned into thick, pearlescent droplets that cling to the tips of the jasmine leaves like unstrung jewels. In the southern song, this is the time for internal gathering. The outward display of the garden is fading, but the internal strength of the plants is concentrating. He walks to the center of the garden and performs a slow bow to the four directions, a ritual of respect to the forces of heaven and earth that made the harvest possible. He notices a small patch of moss near the pond that has grown unusually vibrant, a deep emerald green that seems to glow in the dim morning light. He kneels to touch it, feeling its soft velvet dampness. This moss is the skin of the earth, and its health is a direct reflection of the garden's overall harmony. He decides that today will be spent in quiet refinement. He will not prune, he will not dig, and he will not move heavy stones. Instead, he will spend the day tending to the smallest details, removing a single stray weed from the moss, adjusting the flow of the water inlet to ensure the sound of the stream remains a silver murmur, and wiping the dust from the stone lanterns. As he works, the master's daughter passes through the garden on her way to the pavilion. She is carrying a zither, guqin, wrapped in brocade. She stops briefly and watches the gardener. The garden feels different today, she observes, her voice light and melodic. It feels as though it is listening. The gardener nods, a look of profound understanding in his eyes. It is listening to its own roots, young mistress. After the song of the flowers, it must return to the silence of the wood. She smiles and continues on her way, and soon the deep, resonant notes of the zither begin to float through the air, perfectly complementing the stillness of the trees. The music of the zither and the rhythm of the gardener's hands become one. He feels a sense of timelessness, as if the year 1180 has paused to allow this moment of perfection to linger. He realizes that the garden is not a destination, but a process of constant becoming. The jasmine tea in the jars is one fruit of this process, but the peace he feels now is another. By mid-afternoon, the sun breaks through the clouds, illuminating the garden in a brilliant, fleeting gold. The gardener stands back, his small rake in hand, and simply breathes. He is a part of the song, a part of the earth, and a part of the eternal fragrance that binds them all together. As the notes of the guqin fade into the rustling of the bamboo, the gardener moves to the western edge of the garden to inspect the spirit stones. These are the weathered rocks brought from the distant Taihu Lake, chosen for their ying or hollow transparency. In the fading light of the afternoon, the holes in the stones catch the breeze, creating a low, ghostly whistle to the gardener. This is the voice of the mountain visiting his lowland sanctuary. He takes a small brush and gently cleans the lichen from the crevices, treating the stone as if it were as delicate as a jasmine petal. In 1180, the hard and the soft are seen as two sides of the same coin. The strength of the stone protects the fragility of the flower. He reflects on the master's library, where scrolls describe the 36 fragrances of the heavenly realm. He knows now that no scroll can truly capture the scent of a midnight harvest. The ink is static, but the scent is alive. It moves through the blood, settles in the lungs, and eventually dissolves into the spirit. He realizes that his hands, rough and stained with earth, have written a story that no brush could replicate. He has written it in the air of the estate, in the steam of the master's cup, and in the healthy vitality of the jasmine vines. This realization brings him a sense of a profound inner stability. As evening approaches, the air takes on a scent of ripening persimmons from the orchard beyond the wall. It is a heavier, muskier smell than the jasmine, a signal that the cycle of the year is moving toward its fruitful conclusion. The gardener walks back toward his quarters, stopping at the stone basin to rinse his tools for the final time today. The water is cold, numbing his fingers, but the sensation makes him feel alive and connected to the cooling earth. He looks up at the sky, where a flight of wild geese is silhouetted against the orange and purple clouds, flying south toward the warmer reaches of the Yangtze. In his room, he lights a small stick of sandalwood incense, the scent acting as a bridge between the floral memories of summer and the woody reality of autumn. He sits in the darkness, watching the ember glow. He thinks of the 1,000 small decisions he made during the harvest: when to pick, how to toss the leaves, how much charcoal to add to the fire. Each decision was a thread in the tapestry. He is satisfied. The year 1180 is maturing, and he is maturing with it. He lies down on his mat, the silence of the garden acting as a lullaby. The jasmine is quiet, the stones are still, and the gardener's heart is at rest. The dawn of the 9th month arrives with a crisp clarity that seems to sharpen the edges of every leaf and stone in the garden. The gardener steps out onto the veranda, noticing that the heavy mist of the previous days has lifted, revealing a world that is beginning to blush with the first hints of autumn. The maples near the pond are showing flecks of crimson, and the air carries a thin metallic scent, the smell of coming frost. This is the time of refining the essence, where the garden sheds its outward vanity and prepares its internal architecture for the cold. He walks to the central jasmine trellis, his hands tracing the rough bark of the older vines. These vines are the grandmothers of the garden, having survived decades of shifting dynasties and changing weather. He notices that they have begun to pull their sap deep into their hearts. He decides to perform a tending of the roots, a delicate process of aerating the soil around the base of the plants without disturbing the fine, hair-like feeders. He uses a small pointed bamboo stick, gently piercing the earth to allow the cooling air to reach the depths. It is a slow, rhythmic task that requires a deep connection to the plant's silent language. As he works, the estate's head cook approaches him, carrying a small ceramic bowl filled with the morning's rice water. In the southern song, nothing is wasted. The starchy water from the kitchen is considered a precious tonic for the soil. The cook, a man of few words and much heat, stands for a moment and watches the gardener. "The master opened a jar of the midnight star last night," the cook says gruffly. He said the scent was so clear it made him feel as if he were standing in the middle of a lake of light. The gardener doesn't look up, but his hand slows for a fraction of a second. This is the only praise he needs to know that his labor has translated into a moment of transcendence for another. The midday sun is bright but lacks any real heat, casting long, pale shadows across the swept earth. The gardener takes a break to sit by the wall of lingering fragrance. He looks at his hands. The skin is like old parchment, stained by soil and tea tannins. He realizes that he and the garden are becoming one and the same. The soil is in his pores and his sweat is in the soil. In the philosophy of 1180, this is the highest state of being, to lose the self in the service. He is no longer an individual named for a trade. He is a part of the seasonal breath of the southern song. By the time the evening bells begin to toll from the city walls of Linan, the gardener has finished the aeration. He stands and stretches, feeling a deep ache in his lower back that feels like a badge of honor. The garden is quiet, the jasmine is safe, and the air is turning toward the night. He walks back to his room, passing the pond where the koi are moving slowly, conserving their energy for the winter. He feels a profound sense of harmony. The year 1180 is slowing its pace, and the gardener, with a peaceful soul and a steady hand, is content to slow down with it, watching the first stars of autumn blink into existence over the dark, fragrant earth. The moon of the 10th month hangs heavy and pale like a ghost of the summer sun. The gardener sits in the absolute stillness of his room, the only sound being the soft, dry rattle of the remaining leaves on the jasmine trellis outside. The vibrant energy of the harvest has fully condensed into a singular, quiet point of existence. In the year 1180, this is known as the return to the void, where the visible world retreats to allow the invisible spirit to strengthen. He lights no lamp tonight. He has lived in this garden so long that his eyes see the movement of shadows as clearly as the movement of light. He thinks about the concept of scent memory. He knows that even now, in the cold of autumn, the scent of his jasmine is traveling. It is in the breath of the scholars who discuss poetry over a steaming cup. It is in the silk robes of the ladies who walked through the drying rooms. It is even in the wood of the crates that carried the tea to the northern borders. His labor has become a ghost that haunts the empire with beauty. He realizes that he has achieved a form of immortality that no emperor can command. He does not need a monument of stone. His monument is a fragrance that lingers in the minds of men. He rises and walks out into the garden one last time before the deep sleep of winter. The air is sharp now, biting at his skin, but it feels honest. He approaches the grandmother vine and places his hand on its cold, rough bark. "Sleep well," he whispers, his voice barely a breath. He can feel the life deep within the wood, slow, patient, and invincible. The jasmine is not dead, it is merely dreaming of the sun. He looks up at the stars, which seem to vibrate in the cold air like distant lanterns. The great canopy of the Song dynasty stretches over him, vast and indifferent, yet he feels perfectly placed within it. The gardener returns to his mat and lies down, pulling his heavy hemp blanket up to his chin. He feels a sense of profound the wisdom of knowing when to stop. The cycle of 1180 is complete. He has planted, he has tended, he has harvested, and he has let go. There is nothing left but the waiting. As he closes his eyes, the image of a single white jasmine bud, glowing in the moonlight of a summer past, flickers in his mind. It is a light that will never truly go out. Surrounded by the scent of earth and the promise of spring, the gardener surrenders to a deep, well-earned rest. The story of the scent is finished, and the silence of the garden is total. Good night. The sun of the 11th month rises with a brittle, crystalline light that seems to shatter against the frozen dew on the garden paths. The air is no longer a carrier of scent. It has become a sharp, cold blade that clears the lungs and focuses the mind. The gardener emerges from his quarters wrapped in a thick, quilted robe of indigo-dyed hemp. He carries a small brazier of hot coals, not for himself, but for the most delicate of the young jasmine saplings. In the year 1180, the transition into the great cold is a test of the gardener's foresight. He must be the barrier between the fragile life he has nurtured and the indifferent cruelty of the northern winds. He moves toward the nursery, where he has constructed small tents of straw and bamboo. He places the coals in a safe, stone-lined pit nearby to radiate a subtle warmth that prevents the sap from freezing within the stems. This is the shadow work, the labor that produces no immediate flower and no intoxicating fragrance, yet is the foundation upon which all future beauty depends. He sits on a bundle of straw, watching the thin thread of smoke rise from the brazier. He realizes that his relationship with the jasmine has changed during the summer. They were partners in a dance of creation. Now, he is a father protecting a sleeping child. The silence of the estate is profound. The master and his family have retreated to the inner chambers where charcoal fires burn day and night and heavy curtains keep the chill at bay. The gardener, however, remains in the threshold. He prefers the company of the dormant earth. He looks at the grandmother vine, now encased in a thin, translucent layer of rime. It looks like a sculpture of silver and glass. He knows that beneath that icy armor, the plant is performing a miracle of endurance. It is concentrating its sugars, toughening its cells, and preparing for the explosion of life that will come with the first rains of spring. As midday approaches, the sun manages to melt the frost into 1,000 dripping diamonds. The gardener takes a small wooden bowl and collects the meltwater from the jasmine leaves. In the traditional medicine of the song, this frost water is believed to hold the essence of the plant's resilience. He drinks it slowly, feeling the cold slide down his throat. It tastes of stone and hidden potential. He feels a surge of quiet energy. The year 1180 is drawing to a close, but the spirit of the gardener is as firm as the roots beneath his feet. He has learned that the true secret of the jasmine is not how it blooms in the sun, but how it survives in the dark. He stands, adjusts the straw tents, and prepares for the long, quiet vigil of the winter night. The winter solstice arrives with a sky the color of lead, and the garden is held in the iron grip of the deepest yin. The gardener stands by the frozen pond, watching the koi huddle in the dark depths where the water remains liquid. There is no movement in the jasmine grove. The vines are skeletal and still, stripped of every luxury. In the philosophy of 1180, this is the time of extreme stillness, where one must face the core of one's being without the distraction of growth or color. The gardener feels a strange kinship with the barren landscape. Like the garden, he has shed his seasonal identity and returned to the simple breathing essence of a man. He spends the short afternoon in the storage shed, his hands busy with a different kind of craft. He is weaving new baskets from split bamboo, his fingers moving by memory even in the dim light. Each weave is a preparation for a future he cannot yet see but knows will arrive. He thinks of the jars of jasmine tea, now perfectly aged in the master's cellar. By now the fire heat of the drying process has settled, and the jasmine's spirit has fully married with the tea leaf's body. He imagines the flavor, mellow, deep, and haunting, like a memory of a summer afternoon captured in a cup of liquid jade. As the sun sets, casting a pale, weak light over the snow-dusted walls, the master himself walks into the garden. He is wrapped in heavy furs, his breath a white plume in the air. He stops beside the gardener, looking at the silent jasmine vines. "They look dead, don't they?" the master asks softly. The gardener pauses his weaving and looks up, his eyes steady. "No, master, they are not dead. They are remembering. They are holding the memory of the sun deep in their roots so they can find it again when the time is right." The master nods slowly, a small smile touching his lips, and places a hand on the gardener's shoulder, a rare gesture of shared understanding between two men bound by the same soil. That night the gardener sits by a small fire in his room, listening to the wind howl through the eaves. The year 1180 is almost gone, a ghost of time passing into the records of the song. He feels no sadness for its passing. He has fulfilled his purpose, and he has seen the cycle through to its end. He picks up a small piece of charcoal and marks a final stroke on his wall, counting the days. He knows that in the silence of the frost, the first microscopic stirrings of next year's jasmine are already beginning. He lies down, wrapped in the warmth of his task, and falls into a sleep as deep and certain as the roots of the garden. The harvest is a memory, the tea is a treasure, and the gardener is at peace. The final month of the year 1180 begins with a sky that has turned from leaden grey to a translucent porcelain blue. The air is still frozen, but there is a subtle shift in the quality of the light, a faint, persistent brightness that hints at the sun's gradual return. The gardener walks through the garden with a heavy iron mallet and a bucket of salt. His task today is to break the ice from the drainage channels to ensure that when the thaw eventually comes, the water will not sit and rot the roots of the jasmine. Each strike of the mallet rings out through the silent estate like a temple bell, announcing that even in the heart of winter the work of life continues. he finds himself standing before the grandmother vine once more. In the year 1180, it is said that the oldest living things in a garden are the keepers of its qi, its vital energy. He notices a tiny, almost invisible swelling on one of the grey branches, a node where a new shoot will eventually emerge. It is a microscopic miracle. Despite the weeks of freezing wind and the weight of the snow, the vine has already begun its internal calculation for the spring. The gardener touches the node with a calloused finger, marveling at the sheer tenacity of life. To be a gardener in the Southern Song is to be a witness to this quiet, indestructible hope. In the late afternoon, he retreats to the warmth of the tea processing room, which is now used as a communal space for the estate workers during the cold months. The smell of charcoal and roasted grain fills the air. One of the young assistants brings him a bowl of hot ginger soup. "Old man," the boy asks, "why do we stay out here in the cold while the tea is already finished?" The gardener sips the soup, the warmth spreading through his chest. "We stay because the tea is never truly finished," he replies. "The tea we drink now is the ghost of last year. The tea we will pick next year is being forged in this very frost. If we leave now, we miss the birth of the flavor." As the sun dips below the horizon, painting the snow-capped roofs in shades of violet and rose, the gardener feels a profound sense of chime sincerity. He has been sincere with the earth, and the earth has been sincere with him. The year 1180 has been a journey from the first green bud to the golden jar, and finally to the white silence of the snow. He returns to his room, his heart light despite the cold. He prepares his bed, knowing that the cycle is about to restart. The shadows of the jasmine vines dance on his wall in the moonlight, no longer skeletal but resembling the intricate characters of a poem yet to be read. He closes his eyes, ready for the final dreams of the year, as the garden breathes deeply in its icy slumber. The final days of the year 1180 arrive with a series of quiet, rhythmic snowfalls that transform the garden into a landscape of white silk. Every branch of the jasmine vines is now outlined in thick, soft powder, making them look like delicate calligraphy strokes on a vast, empty scroll. The gardener moves through the garden not with tools, but with a simple bamboo broom, gently shaking the heavy drifts from the younger plants to prevent their stems from snapping under the weight. In the Southern Song, this is the time of the great hidden, where the world's beauty is buried so that its spirit can be purified. He finds a small sheltered spot beneath the eaves of the tea pavilion and sits. From here he can see the entire estate. Now a study in monochrome, he thinks about the word legacy. In the capital of Linan, emperors build palaces and poets write scrolls to be remembered. But the gardener's legacy is more fluid. It is a flavor on the tongue, a fragrance in the air, and the health of a soil that will support generations long after he is gone. He feels no need for his name to be carved in stone. He is content to be the nameless one who understood the heat of the jasmine's heart during the coldest nights of the year. As the sun begins its descent, casting long blue shadows across the pristine snow, the master's head steward approaches the gardener. He carries a small, ornate box wrapped in red silk, a gift for the new year. Inside is a small portion of the very best jasmine tea, the first press they created together in the humid nights of the 6th month. "The master wishes for you to taste the fruit of your own hands," the steward says with a respectful bow. The gardener takes the box, his rough fingers trembling slightly. To own a piece of this harvest is to own a piece of his own life's essence. That night, alone in his room, the gardener performs a simple tea ceremony. He boils the water until it makes the soughing of the pines sound, then pours it over the leaves. As the steam rises, the scent of summer explodes into the cold room, a brilliant, intoxicating ghost of the jasmine harvest. He closes his eyes and takes a sip. The taste is perfection. The sweetness of the flower, the strength of the leaf, and the clarity of the mountain water. He has captured 1180 in a single cup. As the clock strikes the midnight that ends the year, the gardener smiles into the steam. The old year has passed. The new year is a breath away, and the jasmine, even in the snow, remains eternal. The first morning of the new year dawns with a sky so clear it feels like a sheet of polished glass. The year 1180 has officially slipped into the archives of history, and the new year begins with the festival of the first light. The gardener rises before the sun, his breath visible in the freezing air of his small room. Today he does not reach for his rake or his pruning shears. Instead, he dresses in his finest clean robe, a simple garment of coarse grey cotton, and prepares a small offering. In the southern song, the transition of the years is a time to honor the god of the soil, Tu Gong, the silent guardian of the garden's fertility. He walks to the small stone altar tucked away behind the bamboo grove. He places 3 sticks of incense into the sand and bows 3 times. He offers a small cup of the jasmine tea he brewed the night before, the very essence of the past year's labor to the earth. "Thank you for the scent," he whispers. "Thank you for the strength to hold it." As the incense smoke curls upward, joining the morning mist, he feels a profound sense of Jin renewal. The garden is still white with snow, but in his mind he can already see the invisible green fire beginning to stir deep within the frozen roots. By mid-morning, the estate begins to stir with the sounds of celebration. Firecrackers pop in the distance, their sharp reports echoing off the garden walls to scare away the demons of the old year. The gardener spends his time walking the perimeter, not to work, but to observe the state. He notices how the jasmine vines have held their shape against the winter storms. They are lean and toughened like veterans of a long campaign. He knows that the cold has been good for them. A winter that is too warm produces weak flowers. The harshness of 1180's end has ensured the brilliance of 1181's beginning. As the sun reaches its zenith, casting a brilliant cold light over the well of infinite reflection, the gardener sits by the water. The ice on the surface is thick, but he can see the dark shapes of the koi moving slowly beneath it. He realizes that he too is like those fish, living quietly beneath the surface of the empire's grand events, waiting for the warmth to return. He feels no rush. The Tao of the garden is one of infinite patience. He looks at his hands, rested and ready. The story of the jasmine has not ended. It has simply turned a page. As the first day of the new year begins to fade into a purple twilight, the gardener stands and walks back to his quarters, a silent sentinel of the spring that is already on its way. The second week of the new year brings the plum blossom wind, a gusty, spirited breeze that carries the first true hint of change. While the jasmine vines remain in their deep winter-induced trance, the plum trees at the edge of the estate have begun to burst into defiant, pale blossoms. The gardener stands among them, admiring their courage. In the culture of the southern song, the plum blossom represents the scholar's resilience, beauty that thrives in adversity. He realizes that the jasmine is different. It is the beauty of the golden mean, requiring the perfect balance of heat, moisture, and timing. He respects both, but his heart belongs to the vines that require his constant, quiet dialogue. He decides to spend the day in the tool shed, performing the ritual of the edge. He takes his specialized pruning knives and his heavy shears to the sharpening stone. The sound of steel on stone, a rhythmic metallic shick-shick, is the only music in the garden today. He pours a little water on the whetstone, creating a grey slurry that polishes the blades to a mirror finish. A sharp tool, he knows, is an act of mercy toward the plant. A dull blade tears the bark and invites rot, but a sharp one creates a clean wound that heals swiftly, allowing the plant to redirect its energy toward the new growth. As he works, he feels his own mind sharpening, shedding the sluggishness of the winter holidays. By the afternoon, the sun has managed to soften the top layer of the garden soil, turning the snow into a slushy mixture. The gardener takes a long bamboo pole and clears the drainage ditches once more. He is mindful of the flow of qi. If the water stagnates, the energy of the garden becomes sha qi, poisonous and stagnant. He watches the muddy water begin to move toward the outer canal, carrying away the debris of the old year. It is a cleansing ritual, both physical and spiritual. He feels the estate breathing again, its pulse quickening as the days grow marginally longer. As evening falls, the gardener returns to his room and lights a small candle. He pulls out a weathered ledger where he has recorded the dates of the first buds for the last 20 years. He studies the patterns, noting the relationship between the winter's depth and the summer's fragrance. He is a scientist of the soul, documenting the subtle mechanics of nature. He blows out the candle, the scent of warm tallow lingering in the air. Outside, the wind whistles through the dormant jasmine, a sound that no longer feels cold but expectant. The gardener sleeps soundly, his dreams filled with the green maps of the coming season. The moon of the first month reaches its full luminous roundness, signaling the Lantern Festival. While the city of Linan is ablaze with colourful paper dragons and floating lights, the gardener remains in the quiet sanctuary of the estate. He prefers the silver lantern of the moon to the flickering candles of the crowd. Tonight he walks through the garden with a small jar of diluted honey water. This is an old secret passed down through generations of southern song gardeners, feeding the spirit before the body. He sprays a fine mist over the dormant jasmine branches. The sugar provides a slight coating that protects against late-season shocks and offers a tiny burst of energy for the impending awakening. He stops at the Gate of Transition, a small moon gate that separates the jasmine grove from the rock garden. The shadows cast by the moon are so sharp they look like ink washes on the white gravel. He reflects on the concept of emptiness. In the winter, the garden is empty of colour, empty of scent, and empty of fruit. Yet in this emptiness there is a profound fullness of possibility. Without the rest of winter, the jasmine would exhaust itself. Without the silence, the gardener would lose his focus. He realizes that the most important part of the tea is not the leaf itself, but the space the scent creates in the mind of the drinker. The air suddenly shifts, carrying a damp, earthy smell, the breath of the dragon. It is the scent of the first spring rains approaching from the southern mountains. The gardener feels a thrill of anticipation in his marrow. He heads to the shed and prepares the initial mulch, a lighter, nitrogen-rich mixture of fermented bean cakes and river silt. This will be the first meal for the roots once the ground fully thaws. He works by the light of the moon, his movements sure and steady. He is no longer fighting the winter. He is inviting the spring to take its seat at the table. By the time he finishes, the first heavy drops of rain begin to fall, clicking against the bamboo leaves like tiny drums. He stands in the center of the grove, letting the rain dampen his hair. It is a baptism for the new cycle. The rain will wash away the salt and the rime, softening the earth for the journey ahead. He bows to the darkness, acknowledging the unseen forces that govern the rise and fall of all things. As he retreats to his room, the sound of the rain becomes a steady, comforting roar. He lies down, knowing that when he wakes, the garden will have begun its slow, unstoppable transformation from the silver of winter to the emerald of the new year. The rain of the first month continues for 3 days, a persistent, rhythmic soaking that dissolves the last stubborn patches of ice. When the clouds finally part, the gardener steps out into a world that has turned a deep, bruised purple, the color of saturated earth. This is the waking of the insects, Hangzhou, the period when the thunder of spring is said to startle the sleeping world back into motion. The gardener kneels by the jasmine vines and presses his palm to the mud. It is no longer cold enough to ache. It is cool and vibrant, teeming with the invisible energy of 1,000 waking things. He notices that the grey bark of the jasmine has taken on a subtle greenish cast. The sap is rising to the gardener. This is the most critical moment of the vertical dialogue. The plant is moving its life force from the dark safety of the roots up into the vulnerable tips of the branches. He takes a small, fine-edged knife and performs the testing of the life. He makes a microscopic nick in a secondary branch. A bead of clear, sticky moisture appears almost instantly. He smiles. The heart of the garden is beating strong. Today's task is the structural pruning. Unlike the maintenance pruning of the summer, this is an act of vision. He must look at the bare, tangled branches and see the shape of the harvest to come. He removes the thief branches, those that grow straight and fast but produce no flowers, ensuring that the plant's limited energy is directed toward the budding sites. He works with surgical precision, each cut made at a precise 45-degree angle to shed the spring rain. In the philosophy of the Southern song, to prune is to simplify. By removing the clutter, the gardener allows the true essence of the jasmine to shine through. As evening approaches, The air is filled with the scent of wet stone and the distant smoke of the village kitchens. The gardener gathers the pruned branches into a neat pile. He will not burn them. He will steep them in a vat of water to create a mother liquor, a natural growth tonic to be poured back onto the soil. This is the circle of return. As he walks back to his room, he notices a single, tiny sprout of a weed pushing through the path. He does not pull it. On this day of universal awakening, he allows even the smallest weed its moment of triumph. The cycle of the new year has truly begun, and the gardener is ready to serve the green fire once more. The transition from the first to the second month of the new year is marked by the equinox of the wood, a time when day and night reach a fleeting, perfect balance. The gardener wakes to find the garden bathed in a soft, pearly fog that blurs the lines between the earth and the sky. This is the mist of incubation. He walks through the jasmine rows, his fingers trailing over the swelling nodes. They are no longer hard bumps, they have become soft, velvet-tipped promises of green. In the year 1181, the gardener knows that the chime is no longer a subterranean secret. It is rising into the air, visible in the shimmering humidity. He begins the earth turning, a delicate process of loosening the soil that has been compacted by the winter snow. Using a small three-pronged fork, he breaks the surface tension around the base of each jasmine vine. He is careful not to go too deep, for the dragon roots, the main arteries of the plant, must not be disturbed during their first stretch of the season. As he turns the soil, he finds the white, translucent grubs of beetles waking in the warmth. He does not kill them. He simply moves them to the compost pile at the edge of the estate. In the harmony of 1181, every creature has a role in the grand digestion of the earth. By midday, the fog has lifted, replaced by a sun that carries a genuine skin-warming heat. The gardener stops to watch a pair of swallows returning to their nest in the eaves of the tea shed. Their arrival is the definitive sign of the south. He takes this as his cue to begin the first feeding. He retrieves the mother liquor he prepared from the winter prunings, now fermented and rich with the plant's own concentrated history. He dilutes it with fresh spring water and pours it slowly around the roots. It is a homecoming for the essence of the plant, a reminder to the roots of what the branches are capable of achieving. As the sun sets, casting long golden-green shadows across the newly turned earth, the master's head gardener from the neighbouring estate visits. They stand by the wall, two men whose lives are measured in harvests rather than years. The buds are early this year, the visitor observes. The gardener nods, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The winter was honest, he replies. It tested them, but it did not break them. The scent this year will have a hidden strength. They stand in a comfortable silence, listening to the first chorus of frogs from the pond. The gardener feels a deep, quiet joy. The season of preparation is ending, and the season of manifestation is at hand. He returns to his mat, his mind as clear as the spring air, ready for the first green leaf to break the silence. The dawn of the third month arrives, and with it the first true explosion of green. The gardener stands at the threshold of the grove, witnessing the great awakening. Almost overnight, the velvet nodes have burst into tiny emerald-bright leaves that catch the morning sun like thousands of flickering candles. This is the moment where the memory of 1180 finally dissolves into the reality of 1181. The cycle has closed and a new one has begun. The gardener feels a strange lightness in his chest, a sense of wu-wei, effortless action. He no longer needs to plan, he simply flows with the momentum of the rising sap. He walks to the center of the garden and sits on the weathered stone bench. He takes out a small ceramic bowl and fills it with water from the well. In it, he places the very last jasmine bud from the previous year's harvest, the one he had kept in his robe during the winter. As it hits the water, the dried petals unfurl one last time, releasing a final faint whisper of that legendary summer scent. He watches it for a long time, then pours the water and the bud onto the roots of the grandmother vine. The past is returned to the present, the ghost of the old harvest becomes the fuel for the new. Looking around his sanctuary, the gardener realizes that the story of the jasmine is not a line with a beginning and an end, but a circle without a seam. He is the guardian of that circle. He sees the master's young daughter walking toward the pavilion, her steps lighter than they were in the autumn. He sees the swallows diving through the air, weaving the sky together. He sees his own hands scarred, stained, and ancient, and he sees them as part of the garden's own architecture. He has found the eternal middle, the place where work and prayer, man and nature, time and timelessness all meet. With a deep final breath, the gardener stands and picks up his bamboo rake. The first weeds of spring are appearing, and the young leaves need to be checked for the first signs of the spring mite. There is no sadness in this ending, for in a garden, nothing ever truly ends. The scent of 1180 lives on in the tea jars of the empire, in the dreams of the jasmine vines, and in the quiet soul of the man who tended them. He bows once more to the sun, then turns back to his rose. The first leaf has turned, the first bird has sung, and the gardener begins again. The story of the scent is eternal. The work is its own reward. Peace remains.
Sleepy History Tales is created for relaxation, entertainment, and sleep purposes.
The stories shared on this channel are inspired by historical events, daily life, and real periods in history, but they may be simplified, adapted, or narrated in a calming way to enhance the listening experience. This content is not intended to be a precise academic or educational source. While we aim to stay generally accurate, some details may be altered for storytelling flow and relaxation.
Please do not rely on this channel as a primary source for historical research or study.
By listening, you acknowledge that this content is designed to help you unwind, relax, and fall asleep.
Thank you for your understanding and support.